Welcome to Prairie Fire Lines, the show where we spark conversations about prescribed fire and its role in conserving Canada's prairie grasslands. I'm Kat Zenz, your host and Communications and Outreach Officer for the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange. We work with partners across Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba to bring fire back to the land safely, effectively, and with respect for the Indigenous traditions that have guided grassland stewardship for generations. We acknowledge that the prairie provinces that we work on are situated on Treaties 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and the homeland of the Métis. Each episode, you'll hear from people in the fire world about how prescribed fire works, why it matters, and the many ways it helps our prairie ecosystems thrive. So cozy up by the fireplace. This is Prairie Fire Lines, where we keep the conversation burning. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Prairie Fire Lines. This is continuing on the last episode, which was a pre-TREX overview in 2023, in October 2023 for the second Canadian Prairies TREX. And this is going into the aftermath of that TREX and going through everything that happened. And this is going to be a really long episode, so kick back and relax and enjoy. And Renny, do you have more to explain about this one?
Yeah, so this one is actually, the first episode was actually the day before TREX started, the evening before TREX, where Kody Wohlers, who was our lead trainer, and Matt Shanklin, who recorded this recording, was our other trainer. And so this is actually their drive home through North Dakota and South Dakota. They're phoning me and we're recording this. I'm sitting in my truck on the burn line after checking a burn at the Northeast Swale, and they're on their way by driving. And so this was a 3-hour discussion of sort of like an after-action review of the entire week. And we go into detail of every single burn, every single day, and what we discovered. So it's a long chat, but it's actually really fascinating to listen back on it and see what we learned that week.
So have fun with this, like do the dishes, do your work.
Go for a drive to North Dakota.
Go for a drive to North Dakota, listening to this podcast.
All right, we're rolling. Welcome back. We're starting from the top. Welcome back to the Self-Propelled Podcast. We're coming here. We're with part 2. Following up or extending on our last podcast about the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange, and I'm editing that out. Here with Renny Grilz again, Kody Wohlers. We're going to do a recap on the week, things that were successful, things that we liked, what we maybe didn't like, that we're going to do better next year, and yeah, Renny, I guess we'll have you start. Coming into Monday, we can pick up where we left off, what you were seeing, what you were feeling at the start of the day, and go throughout what you thought happened, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And Monday morning, that was a big step for us, eh? We hit the ground running. New people coming in, people from last year coming in, and trying to get everyone herded and organized and in their seats by 8 o'clock. But I was extremely impressed first thing in the morning was the people that were at our TREX event in 2022. They showed up early and they started prepping. And they knew what to do first thing when they walked in, and they just asked, okay, well, what do you need me to do? Where do I go? And then they started, right? So that was actually, I was really impressed with that. I was extremely impressed with that. So
awesome.
Of course.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, of course, morning opening, there's always jitters, right? And confusion and stuff. But I think we kicked it off with a really good start, hey? And our weather conditions actually shifted, and we had a really good weather day in the forecast for that day. And so, originally way back when we started planning this event, we were thinking of doing more classroom sessions the first morning, or maybe doing testing of equipment. But we had decided to get into the field as quick as possible and start doing some fires.
Absolutely. And I guess for those listening that weren't a part of this, Monday morning, we have the big brief, right? Everybody's coming into town, bringing their equipment, meeting each other for the first time, kind of laying out how the week's going to go. And so we had the good structure laid out that I think we already talked about our, incident management team breakdown in the last one. But I guess both Kody and you, going through that breakdown, maybe a different structure than we followed last year. How do we think we've had some success in that?
Yeah, so I'll talk about that a little bit. One of my plans as kind of the lead trainer with this was each of the participants, the classroom participants and the students part of it, we were trying to throw a lot at them throughout the week and build them from day 1 to day 2 to day 3 to day 4 to day 5, and progressively picking up the pace, progressively challenging, progressively adding in new tactics, new things for them to build on what was the day before. And this year, as we were driving up here, and as I was planning, I was looking at more of the team and progressing them from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 to year 4, and that's where we added in the different parts of the team to spread out that workload, delegate out rather than just 2 or 3 handling everything. So I think that worked really well. It took a lot of weight off of Rennie's shoulders. It took a lot of weight off of Denyar's shoulders with planning, and made it a lot easier for them to really focus in on one portion of that team rather than trying to keep track of every portion of the team. And going back to Monday, Matt and I, we were the operations side of the coin, working with Renny as the IC, looking at the weather on Sunday night. We thought Monday was our day, then the rest of the week was looking less than ideal for live fire conditions. And the whole aspect of this is we want to get trial by fire. We want to train with live fire if at all possible. So that's why we picked up the pace on Monday, and not knowing what the rest of the week was going to bring and weather changes, and said we got to get through our morning briefing, knock out the high points, and then transition into our live burn day, because we had the window, we had the weather conditions we needed for a number of burn units. So yeah, we worked through that. Like Renny said, people showing up, almost an hour and a half early to lend a hand, ask where needed, and just falling into place. And I think 22 of the participants out of the 45 this year were new, that were non-returners. 14 of those were first-time burners, so they had never been on a fire. So we had a good blend of very new all the way up to experienced firefighters.
Oh, absolutely.
So we could pair up those mentors, mentees, trainers, trainees, whatever terminology you want to use, to get them some experiences, get them that one-on-one connection, and just try to make it the best experience we could for everybody.
And a little foreshadowing. I think we made that move in the positive direction throughout the whole week. That's just my biased opinion, because I had a lot of fun and I think we were pretty successful. So, going through the first part of the day, Renny, you were acting IC. We got through our briefing. A lot of people in the room, a lot of nervous Nellies. Yep. People looking at us, wondering what's actually going to happen here. Maybe I haven't been on a fire in a little while. When maybe we get all the way through the briefing, how are you feeling going out in the field as that acting incident commander and not taking that burn boss role on day one?
Yeah. Yeah, for me, that's for me, that was a big step, right? Because in the Saskatoon region, I end up being burn boss, definitely on all my sites and all my agency sites, but quite often for other agency sites as well, right? Or if I'm not the burn boss, I'm right beside their burn boss in their hip pocket kind of thing, guiding them through the process, right? So, yeah, for me to take that step back, hand over the reins, was it was outside my comfort zone, right? But we selected a series of burn units on a site called the Northeast Swale. It's an ecological conservation site, northeast side of the city of Saskatoon, adjacent to major arterial roads and also major neighborhoods as well. And the site split up into 2 zones, and within those zones we had multiple burn units, and so we delegated Eric Lamb, who's a professor at the University of Saskatchewan, with one side with 2 burn units, and then Dale Gross with Saskatchewan Provincial Parks with the other zone with 3 burn units in that side. And so, yeah, getting them ready, and we didn't tell them they were going to be burning those sites until the night before either, right? So, and they were extremely nervous, and so
a lot of
trying
stress
to
on their shoulders, right?
Yeah. Oh, they were extremely nervous. Bigger burns than they've ever done before. Turns out Dale had never been a burn boss on a burn as well, and so that created a lot of stress for him too. But like Kody said, the goal was to stretch people's limits, right? And I think we did that with this. Also, as part of the one of the changes we made within the structure of the sort of the planning team was delegating roles and responsibilities to everyone as well, right? So, Dale Gross was responsible for ground supply, right? And he pulled together a team of people to get everyone loaded and fueled up, and water resources before we head out. And we had Eric Lamb, he was part of training, so that was his role. And so they were trying to deal with that while also getting ready for their burn units. And so it created a lot of moving parts for people, but from an IC perspective was a heck of a lot less stress on me actually overall than compared to the previous year. So
absolutely. And I guess maybe we should break it out. We have 45 participants.
45 participants
Yeah.
from 20 different
45,
organizations. So a lot of very unfamiliar faces, people that don't work day to day.
Yeah, so
together.
People were uncomfortable coming together, not knowing how each other operates and stuff like that. And then I guess we took our participants, right? So getting into the operations side of things, we divided everybody into 2 divisions, right? We had Division Alpha, which Kody was going with them every day for the week, doing the instructing, the leading, the training type of stuff there. I was able to take on Division Bravo, and then I guess you might as well go in alphabetical order. Kody, you want to start with Alpha, maybe that division breakout, some of the stuff you might have talked about in your briefing, and then I can either touch on mine, or you can go through your full operation, and then I can come back and attack mine.
Yeah. So I'll start it off too. We set it up, we split everybody down the middle. So we had essentially two groups of 20 that were on the line. We had a couple of people who were not on the line. Renny being one of them as the IC, his role was big picture and not being on the actual fire line. Dinyar's role as the planning coordinator, he was still doing the behind the scenes things. And then we had a couple other participants who were doing some behind the scenes things and potentially floating, within divisions. So within that division, we split it up into two different crews, and each of those we gave kind of a crew representative. And that was something new for people, just to break up kind of a point person for each crew for accountability, being able to make sure, hey, we have the right tools, we have everybody within, that given squad for span of control, and then a contact person. Rather than having to talk to all 20, we could have that crew rep come up and give them kind of the directions of how to travel and where they needed to go and what they needed to do. And then once we got on site, then the burn boss would would delegate, who the line leads were going to be, and then the line leads would delegate who their igniters were going to be, who their holding resources were going to be, who their UTV operators were going to be. So we really tried to stretch that as far as getting more incident command structure within each division, as well as maintaining that incident command structure on the fire line.
Absolutely.
So kind of building that redundancy at a bigger picture. And there was some confusion with that, having that crew representative. But I think by the end of by day 3, by Wednesday, people had it down. And I think they liked it because they had somebody to go to with those immediate questions. And that way, the division soups, the IC wasn't getting overwhelmed with, 20 people's questions all at one time.
Yeah. Really spread that out, over the course of the week.
Yep, absolutely. So we started on that pond renovation site, right next to a major, like Renny said, a major street intersection of an artery that comes out of the city. Right across the street, major housing development. And these are a couple of the key things that are really limiting factors for fire around that Saskatoon area, with all the urban interface, all the urban sprawl, and the smoke management is key. And especially with a couple of these burn units, having very, very strict weather direction and weather parameters. So that way, especially Monday, we had really good lift on our smoke column, so we could really go a little bit faster, use different ignition patterns to pump that smoke straight up and out, rather than putting it across the street or into a neighborhood.
Yeah, and I guess before we get too far into the full operation, Renny, being local, maybe talk real quick about the importance of your guys' smoke management. I mean, Kody just obviously touched on it, excuse me, with the housing developments, with the major highways, the roadways, with travel. But, touch about how that's been, just even in the past, like that's something that you guys maybe have to consider more heavily to get the people used to that fire culture, smoke in the air type of thing, versus maybe us down in Iowa where we have, the relationships, we have more options with our wind direction, stuff like that to work with.
Yeah, and that's definitely that's a big issue for us, is managing that smoke and managing that public perception of smoke, right? So here in Canada this summer, in Saskatoon, with all the wildfires in northern Canada, we were socked with smoke multiple times this summer too, right? So it's not just managing smoke on the day of the incident, but also we have that perception because of that wildfire smoke that we've been receiving this last year. And we have to work really hard with our planning on how are we going to manage that smoke, and how are we going to set up these burn units, and then also trying to increase that public safety, and then also just how do you deal with people coming up, and when they see smoke here in Saskatchewan, usually people quickly drive and go see where it's coming from, right? So you even have to deal with that public management of people coming onto site as well. So, but it's we've been working on that for the last 8 years. People are starting to get more accustomed to seeing those smoke in the air, and I think as we walk through our story for the week, we're going to really come out that people are actually not surprised now that when we start putting smoke in the air that they know it's us, right? So which is great, right? So but we have to make sure things are safe, right? So and like Kody said, we had the right wind conditions for Alpha that day to do their burns in that tight corner there near two major roads.
Yeah, and then I guess looking back day one, and we'll obviously touch it again day two, I mean, we had the winds forecasted for the correct direction for your guys' unit and for ours over on everything in the swale, but there was that chance of a small wind shift in there later on throughout the day. Yeah. So that obviously impacted our operational standpoint of how we wanted to get things on how we wanted to get fire on the ground, how fast we wanted to get fire on the ground. But also, try to work in that human factor of people coming together for the first time of the week, and then, get it down safely. Because, end of the day, we already talked about this. Safety is that number one priority. Training's our number two priority. And then, the byproduct of those two being successful is fire, right? So, Kody?
Yep.
You want to hop into your guys' first couple units there?
Yeah, first couple units, we had that dry pond site, and that was kind of knocking the rust off, getting everybody laid out as far as how we wanted an ignition pattern to go, how we wanted the speed, the tempo, where igniters are in relationship to the UTVs, in relationship to holders, where holders needed to be. So we did a couple of quick suppression exercises, lighting a little strip, putting it out with hand tools, lighting a strip, putting it out with a bladder bag, light a strip, putting it out with a leaf blower, just so those first-time firefighters could see what the usefulness of those tools was in that moment. And then, another thing I want to touch on is all of these sites that we were on were still open to the public. So, that's one thing that I want to acknowledge Renny for. It was, being willing to leave them open to public that could walk up to you, have a conversation with you, ask you a quick question, rather than completely shutting down these public areas for a day or two or three. And the high visibility, the high usage on all these properties was really amazing to me, because people were constantly flowing through, slowing down, stopping, taking pictures, or at least driving by to see what was going on. So we got laid out on those lines, got some good fire on the ground. People were able to observe some different ignition patterns, because it was just a really great site for that, for looking at strip fire, backing fire, perpendiculars, dots, and then that one went real smooth. Had a couple of little wind swirls, because our wind was really light and variable that day, and more terrain influence than anything, but made some people nervous. They hadn't seen that fire coming at them or going away from them where they didn't expect it.
A lot of that like ground driven or fire driven weather at the ground level.
Yep, fire driven weather, a little bit of topography when it was in the bottom of the basin and it wanted to come out of that basin. But everybody kept level head, wrapped the unit, mopped it up, had a good AAR, and then we moved on to our second unit. And our second unit was another really good training unit, because it was completely surrounded by crusher dust trails, so crushed rock trail, very solid fire line, and we were able to, and it had some topography in the middle where it had a little bit of rise in the middle, so we were able to speed up our ignition on that and show people, when you generate a lot of heat quick and run all that fire to the middle, you can really push your smoke column straight up and out. And Maura, one of the city of Saskatoon burn bosses, mentioned she had never thought about days where she could just push the smoke straight up and out. She was more worried about, where can I not hit buildings with a general wind direction rather than, the vertical movement. Yeah. So I think, from her standpoint, from a burn boss, I think she now sees that is an option, on those light variable wind days. If you have really, really good lines, if you can light it fast and really put that energy release into going vertical rather than going out one direction of your unit.
Absolutely. And we had similar, obviously, success, same site with our smoke management. I guess before we get into Bravo's operation, Renny, I don't maybe want a full IC breakdown from the day quite yet, but maybe let's just give a little breakdown of, you sitting back and watching Alpha's operations and some of that media interaction and stuff like that.
Yeah. It was quite interesting that day. We had sent out a press release on the previous week that we were going to be doing these training exercises and prescribed fire, and we had the local TV channel come out, right? So I met them at staging for Bravo, and they showed up early, and but they interviewed me in front of Bravo while they were unloading equipment and getting their briefings, and so they got some video there, and then they went over to Alpha. Dinier took them over and helped, did some filming while Alpha was doing the burns in that dry pond, and then they actually threw up the drone and got some imagery as well from the air, so which was great. Local media and really supportive, right? And they got they got a lot of support out of that. We got a lot of people picked up that story, and a lot of people were reaching out to me afterwards, 2 or 3 days later, saying that they saw it on either the suppertime news or the morning news the next day. So, really got a lot of that public attention, which was great. For myself, though, I was running between both divisions, right? They were about a mile apart where the operations were. And I was with Bravo when Alpha did the Big Bird on the second unit, right, the trail loop unit, and I see the big plume go up in the air, right? So the first gut reaction is, seeing that smoke, and then my second reaction was, oh darn, I missed it, right? So I wish I could have been there to watch it, but I was helping to spot for Bravo as well, right? So it was. It was quite interesting to be part of both operations, but not really be part of both operations, and trusting my burn bosses to deliver.
Absolutely. And then now we just got to get you to change that thought process instead of the oh crap first to oh I'm missing out first, and then maybe think about the oh crap, or just don't worry about it, I guess. So
yeah, but, I know.
But no, that's good. And yeah, I was pumped. We saw Kody's smoke going up. I do think our ignition was behind Kody's initial ignition, so people seeing smoke in the air kind of got them a little more excited, kind of get that momentum start to move before we got fire on the ground. So I guess I'll jump into Bravo real quick. So we took on the 2 units, Salamander Slough and Pinned Rock. Yep, Pinned Rock. Two good units. We had the third one, Short Ear Owl. That was the big 40-acre unit. That would have been the biggest one for Meewasin to date, single unit size. So, I personally was really wanting to get after that one. I wanted to make it happen, but looking at the breaks that we had, looking at the crew, the cohesion wasn't quite there yet. We decided we're going to start off on the Salamander Slough one, which directly bordered the Short-eared owl, the short-eared owl one, but it looked like a better opportunity to take a small unit with solid brakes, a very beat down trail, mowed and tied into the water on 2 different sides. So we really only had to defend 1.5, sides of that unit. But so we got there, got unloaded, working with Dale a lot. Dale Gross on that, being the burn boss, pretty nervous, had a lot going on this morning. We talked through some things. He seemed like he had a grasp for what was going on. He had a plan. We had some baby steps to get through to get the day started, which, that was across the board. And we got the plan out there, basically set a baseline in my mind for the communication and the team for the week. This is where we're starting at, and then we're going to grow from here. And we saw that, of course, even throughout that day. So we wanted to do a little suppression exercise like Kody's division got to do on Salamander. We wanted to start by the water, and then right where we had it tied into the water, there's a bunch of that, bulrush, cattail mix, really heavy wetland fuels, really coarse, and the wind was just so variable there. We did a little test fire, and she, just maybe start a suppression exercise, maybe just get a little fire on the ground to get people going. And, it flared up pretty good, 7, 10, 12-foot flame lengths in that really hot, wetland edge type that doesn't generally like to back. It likes to head fire. And so, of course, it picked up some heat pretty fast, and it started pulling away from the line, kind of going interior towards the unit. I looked at the unit ahead of time with Dale. He wanted to scout it out with me, which was great, a good foresight. And then so we knew the center of the unit didn't have a lot of super heavy fuel. So truly, if something started heading that direction, we were safe. But there was some nerves of like, well, where's this fire going to go right now? So we got in there and had an unintentional suppression exercise when we wanted to shut it down, and kind of showed everybody, take your water. Water can be very useful. Get the water in there first, but the water's not going to save the day. Follow that up with the hand tools, with the bladder bags. UTV hose was the first water in type of that stuff, and then really get that under control to where we felt comfortable where we were at. And it was an eye opener for a couple people, some of those beginners that never seen, something flare up just like that fast, in a couple seconds. We got big flames making a lot of black in a hurry. And, I think it got them in the right mindset. I think it did make them a little more nervous for what was to come on the burn. But we did get out there and, everybody kind of talked about it like a mini AAR in the middle of the operation. And we got our teams divided out and split sides. And so we moved to like two teams, within the division. Let's see, who was the deal? So Amanda's team Moeller. Yep. I took them to the other side where we had a good mow line, and started working them, through those ignition patterns, through the holding patterns, getting some wet line down. They started with a wet line that was shooting a straight stream right out of the nozzle onto the ground, a pencil width wide. And we kind of talked about that, and they got to see that fire's gonna just sit right over that, right? We're gonna push fire into the garden and challenge the line going into the break pretty hard. And we were gonna have to fight really hard to try to keep that fire contained, without having any more suppression, water resources ready at the time. And so, worked with them. We got the hose going. They adapted very quickly. Somebody was like, "Oh, there's a lot of chaff on this section of the line. A lot of material from the mower. What can I use this leaf blower to make it a little, part the Red Sea, for lack of a better term?" And got a bunch of that out of the way. They used the hose instead of the wet line that was plumbed to lay down a thicker, wider wet line, and we got that tied in. And eventually just got full ignition, rung the unit, met up with the other squad. They were kind of waiting on us until we secured from the trail down to that wetland edge. And once it was go time. So we knocked a lot of rust off right out the gate in that. In a good way and in a bad way. There could have been better structure. I know I wasn't feeling super great about my briefing early on. I don't think I encouraged the right, the detailed enough briefing once we got on site. We all talked through things and we got some assignments, but there was just a lot of questions. And, we were walking that fine line of stand here all day and talk, or get a little fire on the ground with the intention of people to learn by doing and have a little discomfort in it. So once we got that put together, immediately everybody's morale just picked right up. I mean, it went from 0 to 25 almost instantly. People saw the unit come together. We had clean straight lines. Everybody was just starting to refresh from what they did last year. And Dale came up to me, and he was he'd been a little flustered a few minutes earlier, and he goes, "Well, can we do the next one?" And I was like, "Well, absolutely." Yeah. So, Dale was like, "Let's go look at it." I mean, let's check it out. So we took a ride around the shore, the Pin Rock unit. Renny likes to say it's a steep topographic unit. He's wrong.
For Saskatchewan, it's a steep topographical unit.
Yeah. No, it's a really, really cool unit. Out of that northeast swale, like a lot of rocks, a lot of boulders mixed in. It had two little parallel ridges that ran north-south, right? North-south? Mm-hmm. Yeah, north-south through that
north-south, yeah.
They were super cool. Just array of fuel loading throughout the whole thing. And it was basically an oval, and the entire break was a walking trail that people have readily utilized. So it was beat down to absolutely nothing. And then Renny, when he was installing the brakes, he did a mow line off that trail in the taller stuff. So we had just a transition of fuel, really short, nothing all the way up to the taller stuff. And at that point, the wind had died down, and Dale looked at it and he goes, "Well, are we even going to need any holding resources?" And I was like, "No. We got uphill on every single side of this thing with those awesome ridges in the middle." And so, like Kody said, we took advantage of that situation, knowing we had the houses, knowing we had the right conditions, and we laid out the plan to everybody. People were uncomfortable that there wasn't going to be UTV going first with a wet line. People were uncomfortable just, what's going to happen if we just ignite this whole thing as fast as we can. And I found it kind of funny that when Renny came over to us and said, "Are you guys doing it?" I was like, "Absolutely. Dale's on board. Dale's comfortable with what we're going to do here." And And Renny goes, well, are you going to do it Iowa style? And everybody looked at Renny, and Renny said, and he just looks around, and I'm like, they're all like, what does that mean? I'm like, well, because we're going to do it fast. And we took off, and I think we had 2 ignitions going separate directions. I told everybody not to stop and just continue with ignitions. We had solid brakes around the whole thing, and what did we do? We rung that unit in 12 minutes.
Yeah, it was fast. It was extremely fast.
We had great response to the fire pushing uphill, great response with our smoke, punching it up into the sky. Kody was giving me crap throughout the whole day over the text saying, hey, where's your smoke at? Where's your smoke at? Where's your smoke at? And then I get another text saying, well, I found your smoke. So, little playful between us two. So, super successful. Everybody got that done, and the team was just absolutely ecstatic. They were quite literally, not quite literally, figuratively on fire. That would have been bad if they were literally on fire. But they were just super pumped up. Everybody had a lot of good things to say in our AAR, and great start to finish off day one. Setting a good pace. People were learning, asking questions. Why do we do this way? Stuff like that. Obviously, we had confusions with implementing some of that incident command structure, the chain of command, stuff like that. But something to start at a good spot, and that'll be my wrap on our ops right there. But Renny, when you before you touch on your version, what you got to see from Bravo ops, and Kody, feel free to chime in on this. I wasn't here last year. We came into day one. Our operations in day one, they were slow, but in comparison to where you guys ended last year, you guys seem to think we were maybe a few steps ahead, right?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, compared to where we were last year, we were probably, what we pulled off on the Monday was probably equivalent to what we were doing on the Wednesday last year. So just everyone seemed to gel, those little morning jitters kind of thing with the first burn units. But, that's why we picked those first burn units on both Alpha and Bravo. They were more simple, a little smaller, just to knock off that rust. And then the second burn units were, real nice tight units, nice simple ring burns kind of thing, but really good ones to get the team gelled around something fun, but also something that can be done quickly and creates, unique fire behavior.
Kody?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, I would echo what Renny said. We were hitting it on day one about where day 3 was last year. The people who were there last year had seen kind of the model, but they just needed that refresher. And then, just pushing that comfort zone, getting familiar with the equipment again, getting familiar with their crew, names, people, all that. And like you said, Matt, everybody was kind of riding a high when we came out of those units on Monday, for sure.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Renny. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say for myself, with Bravo, with that second, that pinned rocky unit, I stood on the ridge. There was another ridge to the south of your burn unit, and I just sat there and watched, kind of thing. And just watching how the crew was working and how they were working in parallel, or, 2 lines going opposite directions and meeting on the southwest corner, and just keeping that nice even pace, right? And I was extremely impressed watching that.
Awesome. I guess, do you have any thoughts or any more comments, like stuff you observed there on Bravo's side, as that day, finished up?
Yeah. First thing in the first burn unit, I was getting a little worried. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I've known Dale for a lot of years, and I definitely could tell Dale was under a lot of stress and was very nervous. And but I figured, Matt, you'd be able to talk him through and get him rolling, right? And you did, right? Took a while, but once he got past got comfortable again and got rolling, he brought it together, right? And it was also interesting to watch splitting up into the two lines, right? And because normally when we burn in Saskatoon, it's everyone's on one line, right? And we usually don't split into two lines until it's maybe the final ignition or something like that. But starting out on the two lines, I think that was really good experience for everyone.
Awesome. All right, so let's move into day 2, 3. I don't know if we have to go into so much detail. Obviously, we all like to talk, so it sucks for you listeners that this might be a really long second part of the podcast. And hey, maybe it's going to be we get through day 3 and we just I'll cut it off and we'll post it a part 3 for the second half of the week. But yeah, moving to day 3. People still showing up early in the morning. We weren't home at. It's not like we were home early. We were after dark by the time we got back. We had our incident management team meeting. That went pretty well. A lot of, everybody on the team had something to say, good and bad. A lot of good discussion, making a plan for the next day, and then, excuse me, like I just said, Tuesday morning, people were there late the night before. They showed up early again. Everybody got rehabbed the night before. Everybody, that wheel started turning. Not a lot of bumps in it. It was just super successful. As Kody kept saying all week, the hamsters were turning. Hamsters are running up there, and we were getting, a bunch of success, at the compound. So I guess before we get into that, you guys, Kody, I think you got probably some thoughts on that, coming back from our operational period.
Yeah, coming back from the operation, I tied in with Renny, and I said, "What's our weather for tomorrow?" And he said, "The weather's changed. Tomorrow's a go day. We're burning," which obviously excites me. A little bit for the listeners too to know, this group of people, they're able to do the book work, the coursework, the intellectual work. There's a lot of that in the room.
Yeah.
But the actual hands-on fire line experience is what they really need and thrive. So, that's where we're pushing, maybe even pushing the envelope a little bit on the weather parameters. Tuesday's forecast it's a concern, a little bit of a red flag because it was a light and variable wind, and then we were supposed to get that wind switch, 180 degree wind switch late in the day. So, I don't like putting timestamps on my burns, but I was like, we have to be done with operations by 3:00.
Yep.
Because we're going to get a 180 degree wind switch. But with the units we chose that big unit, that short-eared owl prairie, next to where Bravo was on day 1, and then the Wanuskewin sites, which is an indigenous cultural site on the north side of town, with very good brakes, I think we chose the right units for sure for that day, and the team was feeling good. Burn bosses had one under their belt. Each division had one under their belt, and so we're like, yeah, let's go for it. And so that short-eared owl one, Division Alpha took that, and Meewasin's biggest burn to date on that day.
Yeah.
And and then we needed to send Bravo up to Wanuskewin for the staffing that needed to be on that site for Wanuskewin personnel. And I think it went off pretty much without a fault.
Yeah.
Alpha had some challenges. We had that 180 degree wind switch, and we weren't quite wrapped up, but it pushed our burn boss on that one. Got her out of her comfort level. Being able to burn with that a little bit more light and variable wind, but having the confidence in the crew and in the team that it could be done.
Yep.
So she made several comments that if this was just me and my staff, we would not have burned this today, just because she was that nervous.
Yep. And I think we heard that from Ian as well. That wind shift, that light and variable, made him very nervous. Burn up in Wanuskewin. I've obviously never been there. Super cool site. A lot of trails and a lot of really good prep going on there. We had something a little different that a lot of our firefighters haven't experienced. We had the powwow unit, and it had the powwow, site in the middle, infrastructure that they use, for, and I guess maybe you, Renny, you could probably talk on that. I mean, they use that for ceremonial stuff and stuff like that, correct?
Yeah, and it's a big celebration where people from all across Saskatchewan and Western Canada come together, and it's almost like a big dance, right? And but they're all dressed out in their gear with ribbons and jingle bells and feathers and their headdresses, right, and moccasins, and they're doing these big dances, right, and it's competition dances as well, right, and it's actually a great party, right? It's a lot of fun, lots of energy, lots of excitement. And some of the dances that they do during the powwows, there's one that's called the chicken dance. And it actually represents the sharp-tailed grouse, how the male sharp-tailed grouse dance on their breeding grounds in the spring, right? So they have all these different dances. They got the grass dance, and they got other dances as well that they perform in this area. So very fitting that and also the Plains Cree, which were local residents of the Saskatoon region, traditionally use fire as a management tool as well, right? So think about the impact of people coming next year to do the powwow at Wanuskewin, walking through an area that had previously been burnt, that hadn't been burnt for probably 100 years, right? So very powerful for that community and for Wanuskewin to be able to do this, right? So
absolutely. And obviously not being from around Saskatchewan, or much less in most of those Indigenous people sites up there, Ian, our burn boss, working there, agency member, he did a very, very good job making it clear and thorough what we should be, how we should be acting there, how we should be, on the fire line, right? How we should be acting during our mop-up, no soil disturbance, stuff like that, because of the importance of that cultural site. And, I thought that was really neat. Just some of that, some of those things that we don't get to experience, at least on our fire line, very often, or just our sites in general. So that was super cool, great experience. I'm pretty bummed I didn't get to go into their building, their super fancy big visitor center there with tons and tons of artifacts and just a bunch of history. So maybe next year we can go in there on a rain day or something and go check that out and hear all about that. But anyway, so back on that powwow site, our firefighters had this powwow celebration infrastructure is right in the middle of the unit. It's literally just a giant donut that sits inside the unit, and it's all made of wood. Every piece of infrastructure is wood, and so I already said this a bunch this week, but a lot of that fire guards, as you guys call them, fire break prep, was all very, very good, very efficient, and it made it a lot easier time for our firefighters to get the job done, safely without a lot of risk of any of that slop or that type of situation, as much as it could have been. I mean, we've been on some pretty tough lines, like me and Kody have, but and some of them were my fault. But so be it.
Made us better firefighters after the end of the day.
Absolutely. There's some great prep in that donut there. With the finish mowers getting it all the way down, just the shortest grass it could be, and material shot off. But I got to take a crew interior in the unit and show them, take advantage of your wind, rip off burn away from half of that circle, because you don't have to fight it and let it. It was putting itself out for the most part in that mode stuff. But even if it wasn't, it was not going to take any work. I mean, we give you guys a really hard time for the amount of flappers you use. But that cool season component, there's a lot of times that they can be very effective. And, they're less effective in our tall bunch grass, stands. But, all you really needed was a flapper or bladder bag. I mean, I was joking that I could have sneezed and put the fire out. It was such a good break. So, and I guess, Renny, you weren't on site for any of that, right? I mean, you were over at the Swale.
Yeah, I was at the Swale because that's my home agency's site. So permit was under my name with the fire department, so I had to stay on site. But we showed up. Kody and I showed up after while you were doing your mop up to come and observe. So
Yeah, absolutely. So we got that teed off. Everybody was super happy with that. Ian had 3 units up for the day, and I guess, you know, if you listen to this, if you continue to listen to this podcast, you will find out that there is no rhyme or reason to the direction I go with how I talk. Scattered all over the place. It's just is what it is. So hope you get used to it. But anyway, so Ian was first time burn boss, right? He had not led a burn before. He's been on the fire line, you know, a handful of times, but you know, his agency, his ground, you know, very close tie to hit from him. You know, it's very important to him. So he was like, I'm willing to take on that challenge, step way outside my comfort zone, and attack my 3 units today. They were all directly, you know, bordering each other. All units touched. So we were able, you know, to talk it through and be like, hey, can we burn these all as one, or do we need to break them up into all 3? So we ended up, because of that infrastructure I talked about, taking the powwow unit first by itself, because we wanted to spend the most amount of time protecting that you know, resource, that internal infrastructure. But in doing that, that actually allowed us to do the other 2 units as one, and have black for our fire to come at and our smoke to go into, so we didn't have to worry about holding anymore, right? So we got that done. I think Ian was very nervous coming into the day. I spent a lot of time in his back pocket talking with him, talking through scenarios, you know, talking through the planning, you know, had a good briefing on site. You know, I guess the first day, one of the downfalls that we had is we set up our kestrels, super nice kestrels, even can link to your phone. We didn't read weather off to our crews. You know, huge, you know, miss on at least on my end. I should have known better to have somebody, hey, what's the weather going on? So we had that going on. That was super great. We saw what the weather was doing, and then we knew that wind shift was coming, so we obviously, you know, we're waiting for that to happen. And we had success on the fire line. The one thing that we did is we had a good transition from finishing up the powwow into that the next 2 units, but we you know, hung around a little too long. We had a window when it was, you know, light and variable. The fire was driving the weather, and still a little, you know, southeast weather or wind direction, kind of pushing smoke where we wanted to. And we got ignition on the ground. The one you know, team, squad, whatever, took off down the fire line, skipped the black that the powwow unit was in, and then kept igniting on the other end of the road, because that was supposed to be the backing fire side. And you know, the other team held up because they were just, you know, in the end they were nervous. Oh, we were getting too, you know, it was a skinny unit. We didn't want to be too close to you. And you know, hindsight, looking back on it, you know, they should have started that ignition. Our side that I was on was creating heat with that wind just kind of going stale. And you know, if they would have came down that line on the other side, we really would have put some smoke up in the air. You know, I felt really bad for the, you know, we ended up giving names. So Foxtrot, they took their team and called themselves Foxtrot. You know, they ate smoke on the first unit. So, you know, Ian was very, you know, diligent about making sure to rotate those teams between sides so they wouldn't have to eat smoke for 2 days or 2 units in a row. With the wind shift and everything, they got stuck eating smoke again. It sucked for them a little bit. You know, they could have got ahead of it. There was some heavy brush on the line in a couple spots, but it slowed down the ignition, but it didn't impact anything, you know, infrastructure-wise, you know, the visitor center, stuff like that. And I guess overall, you know, had some really good learning moments out there, some nervousness with some people, you know, what the fire's actually doing versus what you perceive it to be doing behind the smoke, where your smoke's actually sitting, stuff like that, how much heat are you putting on your firefighters. So a bunch of really good learning moments to that day. And then, of course, we forgot it on the first day, right? But we set a record the first day, the most acres that Meewasin has ever put fire on the ground in one day, right? Yep. And then...
Yep, that was true. Yeah, first record first day.
And then Kody had to chime in and break that record on the second day.
Day 2, we did the single biggest unit that Meewasin had done.
Yep.
And then it was also Wanniskewin's biggest unit to date on site, especially all in one day.
Yeah.
And then Ian's first burn at Wanniskewin.
Yep.
So, you know, just checking a lot of boxes for progress, both personally and organizationally as we went throughout the week.
And I think,
Well,
go ahead, Renny.
Well, and I was just going to add for Ian's first burn was the previous year at TREX, right? So, he was, brand new in the seat and being a burn boss within the second year, right? So going from first burn a year prior to burn bossing, that's a pretty huge step for him. So.
Oh yeah, big leaps, a lot of, confidence it takes in my mind to step up and or just willingness to step up and say, yeah, I'm willing to be that guy that's uncomfortable. But so we had great there, and of course our team, we still had some great communication upgrades. We got the weather in there. We had still some confusion in the chain of command and how we wanted to set up our teams, but still way better than the next day, and that team was just rolling. People were thinking the right way. People were asking even more the right questions. And I do want to plug, Renny, your guys up there. It's super interesting and super awesome when we come in and watch these, at least for me, watching these guys work. And they're asking, like I keep saying, they're asking the right questions to learn, and then they're implementing what they're learning. But there's not one person that I saw, at least when a question's brought up, like that every single person's willing to jump in and help, and they do it in like a very effective, positive manner. Not degrading that person because they don't know how to properly use a bladder bag or something like that. Like, just everything that happens effectively and in a way that everybody's supported in that learning, and they all better from it in a very good structure, every single operational period.
Yeah, the actual spirit of the training exchange model is very strong up there, as far as that continuous learning of you teach me, I teach you, you learn from me, I'm going to learn from you. And then that human compassion that I talked about, I think yesterday in the final briefing, people willing to have that humility of taking that leap and willing to potentially fail, but also that human compassion from everybody else, knowing that person is outside of their comfort zone, and then being that support, lifting that person up, giving them confidence, and then stepping up to the plate and following through on the fire line.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then real quick, Renny, I'll let you, I want to hear a bunch of your thoughts from day two, but one interesting conversation I had with Ian is, he's like top down looking on the operation. He's like, it made me have a better understanding of what the burn boss role is, not just like, running the fire, the person people are calling to, but like what it takes to manage each of the teams and how people are looking for you for instruction and just the overall big picture of the operation. And, he's like, moving forward, I can be more effective if I'm the line leader, because I know I can do a few extra things to take that off the burn boss's shoulders, the unnecessary stuff, down the road, in developing that fire program. So like, he had an experience, he saw a lot of things, but he already is figuring out how he can use them, up and down that line. It doesn't matter if he's just a Trip George firefighter or if he's the holding guy or whatever, how is he going to implement what he learned at the top of the chain to figure out how to be more effective, for his future burn bosses he's working for. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear. That's really cool. So
yeah, day two, Renny, anything you got on the whole day? We can even go back to briefing if you need to.
Yeah, so one of the things, when we actually the night before when we selected the burn bosses, right, and of course Ian was going to be the burn boss for his site, because that was his site, and then I asked for a volunteer to do who was interested in being burn boss for short-eared owl prairie out at the swale,
Yeah,
and
Kody Wohlers,
Carrie
right?
Hecker stepped up.
Kody.
Yeah, Kody Wohlers, yeah. but I asked for a volunteer out of Alpha, right? And it was Carrie Hecker that stepped up to the challenge, right? And looking at the forecast, we knew there was going to be potentially variable winds, right? And she knew that was going to be outside of her comfort level. And so my goal going into TREX was to try and build capacity within our burn boss crew, right? And get those burn bosses doing things outside of their comfort level. And so knowing where Carrie burns and her location and, sort of the burn units that she deals with, she takes it fairly safe. She always burns with a small crew. So that's why she always is more cautious with her burns, and rightly so, with what she has. And so I really was excited to hear that she was willing to take on this challenge, right? And she was definitely nervous, but I think she did a great job. And it was a bigger unit than what and there was those small little hill range in there too, so she couldn't see from corner to corner, and so I think that created a few challenges for her. But I was super impressed with how that unit went off. The Wanuskewin site, I've burned on Wanuskewin a couple of times before, and that site always makes me nervous. The south Wanuskewin sits, there's a creek that flows right through the middle of the property, and then on the very south side of the property is the South Saskatchewan River, and the river breaks, and so you get some really weird wind systems that flow through that site. And then too, the site has parts of it haven't had grazing or fire for decades, and so you got thick, heavy thatch of Kentucky bluegrass and smooth brome grass interspersed with native vegetation, and so you get some really weird wind systems going through, and also that thick thatch creates some issues as well. And so that site always makes me nervous burning on there, and I was actually really nervous about that site, especially with those shifting winds in that forecast, right? So I didn't sleep that well the night before, or that because of those weather forecasts and just knowing what those conditions are out at Wanuskewin. So
yeah, and I can.
But I did.
I was just gonna say I can speak upon the thatch, and that just the amount of fuel there. Oh my goodness! I think you could burn that for 5 years in a row and still have a 6-foot layer of thatch on the ground. I mean, it was thick, beat down. You'd get out a piece of grass that's mopped up, and you just walk away, and it starts smoking, 2 feet away, because it just kept running through that layer of, the material. And it didn't matter if it was in the head fire, the backing fire, the flanking fire. There was just so much material down there that needs to burn. And I mean, obviously, you and Ian, I know you're going to come back and attack it again, right? So.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to have to. And talking with Ian, he has plans on trying to burn as much of that site over the next few years, just to start working away at that thatch, right? And actually, I had a small escape on that site about 6 years ago. We were done mopping up. We were loading up to leave, and except for I was staying on site to monitor, and we had a piece of thatch start on fire outside the burn unit, right? And it was a small escape. We jumped on it, got it out. Maybe it was less than a quarter of an acre that burned, but that was still in the back of my mind too for that day. And so yeah, it's a real interesting site to burn, and it should be. You look at it, you go, this should be simple. This site, hey, it's relative, but no, there's a lot of compounding factors on that site too. One of the other things that I was watching the weather forecast, or I was starting to look at the weather radar mid-afternoon when we started seeing these wind shifts. And what we were having rolling in from the northwest was, so it almost looked like a line of thunder showers, right? If we were in July, it would have been thunder showers, right? And it was about 60 miles away when Alpha was wrapping up, or just about to wrap up, but you were still in full firing operations at Bravo, right? So I was starting to get, okay, you guys better start hurrying up there, because things were going to get super, super windy, and I was quite worried about that. So, but no, you guys, when I phoned you over there, and you guys said you were really close to wrapping up, so that made me feel a lot better too. So
a good lesson I learned on Bravo's second day is, I delegated communications with IC down the chain, and I didn't follow up with that person I should have. It's totally on me. It's not anybody else. I didn't follow up with them to make sure that those updates were going out, on the hour or whenever you wanted them as the incident commander being so far away.
Yeah.
I know I can get in the moment, get that tunnel vision we talk about all the time and keep the operation moving, but I didn't take that second to check in with my point person on that and then make sure that was rolling. So, yeah.
Well, and that. Yeah, and that I think that's some of the growing pains that we have here, right? Is we're not used to running two operations at the same time, right? So, and usually the burn boss is also the IC, right? So, I think for us here, that was part of our growing pains is, having an IC that's totally removed, or not removed, but overseeing the burn, right, from a distance, right? Yep. So, I think for us, that was a good learning experience on communications. So.
Perfect. Wohlers, what else do you got from day one? Or day two? I kind of cut you on your ops.
No, day two. We had that wind switch just before our western division hooked the corner in the southwest corner. So we had a northeasterly wind pushing across our unit. So we had to expedite our ignition to get it tied into that salamander slough from that previous day's black. And I know it made Carrie nervous because then, we had an unlit line along that whole south line, but we had black right across the line.
Yep.
And then a pond beyond that. So, we expedited, tied it in, and then the other division or the other squad brought it on down and closed the box. And then, we did our AAR and went right into mop up. But I think it really, people really recognized while it was going on the wind switch. We had a pretty good smoke whirl in the middle of the unit on that. And I was able to talk to the squad I was sitting next to and talk to them about, they're cool and everything. But as a burn boss, those are what you don't want to see in the middle of your unit or marching out of your unit. Just because, that's a super unstable atmosphere. You don't know what it might do. Wind gusts could bump up to 20, 30 K within, a matter of 2 or 3 minutes. And, go from zero to that. So that's just a couple of things we talked about in the AAR. I think day two really built off of day one. Day one was, building that cohesion, building that confidence, kind of getting the tempo and the speed. And then day two, rotating people around, getting new people on the torches, new people on the UTVs and holding, and just working with the weather the best we could to have a safe operation, and then being diligent and trying to have it knocked out by that 3 o'clock timestamp before the wind switched.
Absolutely. I think we met our goals that day.
Oh yeah.
100%. Across the board, ecological training, everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely did.
All right, Renny, take us into day three.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I should add about day two, though, was I was also monitoring the trail loop burn unit over in the wreck zone of the swale that we burnt on the day one, because there had been some aspen that had burnt and they were still smoldering and stuff. So with that wind event coming in, when Alpha was starting to mop up Short-Eared Prairie, I asked the burn boss to send a small team to go over and do a little bit of mop-up of those burning aspen logs and maybe some of the willow roots, right? So I just did a quick assessment. I said, I saw 10 smokers. Okay, Carrie, can you send out a team? I didn't do, on my part, I didn't do a proper assessment. I just saw rough count of 10. Okay, one unit is probably all you need. One person on UTV and one person with a fire axe or something like that, and away you go, or a rogue hoe, and away you go, kind of thing. And it took them way longer than expected. Took way more water than expected. And so when Kody and I came back from Wanuskewin, we had to bring in more resources to help get that locked down. So, for me, that was a learning experience on. Should have assessed those resources better and maybe had someone recon it and look at that more of a detailed recon before sending out resources. So So that was for me, that was a good learning experience as well. But also that night, that little, I talked about that little thunder shower or whatever, that system that was rolling in from the northwest, came into Saskatoon. The forecast had been for like 1 millimeter of rain, and it socked in. We ended up getting some light rain shower for, I don't know, it was during our whole incident management team meeting, about 3 hours of light showers, I believe, and then it rolled into fog. And so that really changed our plans for us. Like, we didn't expect that much precipitation, and we didn't expect fog to roll into that thick. And so when I rolled into the compound at 6:30, I couldn't even see across the compound. So I came in, dropped off some fuel, and I don't know, the distance between the compound and our shop and the fuel shed is what, maybe 100 yards.
Yeah.
And I can see across. Right. And that fog just hung, and it hung and it hung, and it didn't lift until about noon on the third day. Right. So we shifted. Right. And we went into classroom session, which was actually probably really good. Right. And we did, and that we had that intention of doing more presentations. We always have presentations in our back pocket, and so we figured it was time to do some presentations to the group.
And maybe
before
before we jump into presentations, I do think if those that are thinking about this, like what Renny was just saying about, he didn't think his mop-up, assessment was proper, and we should have evaluated it better. I think one of the more important parts of that is that, we didn't send enough firefighters to get the work done, but that's the most important part is we only sent a few, so those people had to work harder and build upon that. Their fatigue was adding to the wear and tear on their bodies throughout the week, because we talk about it all the time, through the week is, we're operational for up to 5 days. So, everything you do every day wears on you. You're staying out late, you're going to bed late, you're getting up early, and, taking care of yourself and taking care of your team is equally a responsibility, right? So at the end of the day, if one person, 2 people from the team aren't able to operate, that's going to impact everybody. So making sure we're not overworking somebody is critical in a long-term operation like that, whether it is wildfire or just a simple training week, because there are, impacts no matter what. So hop back into the presentations.
So we had a series of 3 different presentations, and the first one we had was we had a lot of PhD. We actually, the running joke was that we had a lot of well-educated people involved with this TREX here in Saskatoon. So we had
a lot of degrees.
Actually 4 people with a lot of degrees, a lot of PhDs, a lot of master's degrees, and I felt like I was probably one of the most undereducated people in the room, actually.
Hey,
so
me and Kody showed up, so I don't know. It's a tie between us 3, maybe.
Actually, probably the 3 of us are probably the most undereducated, right? Except for the School of Hard Knocks, right? So. But so we had Roy. Roy's had been a postdoctorate at the University of Saskatchewan. He now works for the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange as our fire science coordinator. And so he actually talked about the why. Why do we burn, and what kind of impacts does the fire have, right? And so I think people found that really interesting, because he was giving us sort of that, what are the monitoring results? When we monitor the fire effects and the post-fire, what do we get? What are the trends are we seeing, right? And what is the recovery period post-fire? What is the nutrient quality of our grasslands post-fire? And sort of what is the return interval, right? So people were really fascinated by that presentation, and it really tuned into them for what why we're out there and what the purpose of the work we're doing. And especially with ourselves at Meewasin, I hire my summer students and my field techs. They do a lot of the monitoring work, and so for them to see the outcome of their work, I think that was really fascinating for them. Second presentation was was Dale Gross, who had been the burn boss the previous day at the swale. Dale, too, had just finished his PhD. And his PhD project had been a prescribed fire on a nature conservancy property in southern Saskatchewan, looking at the interaction of grazing and fire and sort of the selectivity of post-fire of plains bison, which are there's a free-ranging herd at the Nature Conservancy property, and they also use cattle grazing and looking at that selectivity. And then also part of Dale's project was looking at sort of the social science of fire as well, and also the building the capacity of fire. And so Dale's PhD project actually led to the creation of the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange and sort of building that capacity of fire in the prairie provinces. So he had just defended his PhD 2 weeks prior, and so he still had that presentation memorized, and so he was able to give it to the group too, and so everyone was really fascinated to see that. And then Matt and Kody, you guys went up and you shared some experiences with the group as well, so maybe you can cover what you talked about.
Go ahead, Wohlers.
Yeah, so we went through kind of a series of short video clips, some pictures, just talking about kind of, on the ground fire experiences that are very localized. So, some pictures even from last year, some pictures from the day before, off of that Northeast Swale unit. 1 second, Codes.
So we didn't say this at the beginning. So me and Kody are actually are on the way home from Saskatchewan back to Iowa safely driving, hands on the wheel, the mic's on a stand set up, ready to go, and Kody's dealing with some traffic in front of us in the construction zone. The car in front of us keeps almost hitting the cones, and that's not something we want to deal with. And then Renny is on a video or a voice call with us, Bluetooth into this, so that's how we're getting all this stuff. So apologies if there's wind noise, road noise, anything like that on this, but that was the hesitation Kody just had there, where he was had a thought and then he thought we were gonna have to stop, and here you are again. So yeah. All right, back into it.
Car in front of me missed that cone by I would say less than 6 inches. I'm pretty sure the wind moved that cone a little bit. Anyway, so yeah, I had some pictures that I pulled up from the day before, just with the different ignition patterns and things of that nature. So people could, we were able to hit the pause button, and visually look at those pictures, those videos, talk about them, the good, the bad, all those things, showing where, fire can creep underneath your wet line, for example. It can burn underneath that wet and then poke up on the other side. And then, we were coming into day 3, and I really wanted to distill, everybody had confidence, but I wanted to distill confidence, not complacency. So, keeping diligent, being very thorough, and being very urgent in your methods, moving with a purpose. And then within that, knowing the burn units that we had picked out for the day, so I'll talk a little bit about that. We had 2 burn units picked out that were City of Saskatoon, that were very high profile units. So surrounded by city streets, buildings, condos, very, very in the public's eye units of downtown Saskatoon. And then we had another burn unit that was Nature Conservancy of Canada in Saskatoon, down south of town, about 50, 60 kilometers, that NCC had put a lot of prep into, and they hadn't done a burn in Saskatchewan in quite some time. But this site was grazed fairly heavily, and the fuel loading was not consistent across the unit. So I knew I had a couple of pictures of burned graze sites, and I wanted people to have that visual in their head before they went out to the unit, knowing that this unit's grazed, it's not going to be 100% black, and letting people know that they can be comfortable with that patchiness, because those patches are good refugia for the insects, the small herps, the small rodents. So I think it really brought things together visually and mentally for almost everybody in the room, and to be able to talk through some of those processes and see some of those experiences that Matt and I have had on the fire line over the years, and the ignition patterns, and then being able to implement those the rest of the week. And just like we said, we're building from day 1 to day 2 to day 3, and just keep stepping that up, keep turning that dial just a little bit more every day, both for the firefighters and for the incident management team.
Absolutely. And then we were able to touch just a little bit on, not just ignition patterns, to utilize on the fire line, for your own, convenience or your benefit, but we were able to touch on the ecological, side of it. Like, you can use those same ignition patterns to change what the fire's doing inside the unit, and, change, how we look at it in the hills a lot, like, we don't need to rush that fire straight uphill every single time. Maybe get them to back down the hills, flank off the side of one. So, the different insects, invertebrates, everything Kody just talked about, the rodents, the reptiles, everything, they have a chance to, maybe get out of that. It's different all the way across the board. And, we used our local experience, and I know everybody up here just absorbed all of that stuff. I mean, we saw it immediately on the line, but they're definitely going to think about that on how their fire's impacting the landscape and how they can manipulate it in the right ways to see those benefits. But yeah, Renny, I'll let you take lead on this. You want to talk through all those operations?
Yeah. So the three units that we looked at, I'll start with the city of Saskatoon. This is Naturalized Parks program. So I work very closely with Moira Moser, and she's the natural park supervisor, and she's been burning with me for about 5-6 years since she was in her role. That department had a little bit of fire in the back previous years, about 10 years ago. People's staff changed, and then she started bringing back the fire program as well. But yeah, very high profile sites. These 2 units were naturalized parks, sort of natural features. The one was Hyde Park, which was actually a project that Ducks Unlimited Canada initiated with the city to protect this wetland, turn part of the wetland into a storm pond system, and then do a restoration project around, or I guess you guys call it a reconstruction project of native grasses around these storm ponds. And then the other one across the road was a site called Donner Berkmeyer Park, and very similar, but that one had within that park had sort of sports fields with it, ball diamonds, and disc golf course, I guess, as well. So that one challenge, though, going into that site, knowing that that site in previous years with her more as naturalized parks, is that the vegetation doesn't dry down or doesn't cure until late in October. And this year we've been having lots of rains in August and September, coming out of drought. And so things were really green. And so I think that was something that created a problem for us during that burn. And then the Nature Conservancy property at Dundurn. So this property is adjacent to the Canadian Forces Base Dundurn, which is an artillery military base. And that too, for Nature Conservancy, was a little bit of a challenge. It's a tucked away property. They know the neighbors, but really high risk. Also, that rural municipality declared a state of emergency this year because of the drought, right? So really high risk as well. A lot of eyes upon them, a lot of concerns, but also a lot of opportunities. And so also for the burn boss for that one was Julie from Nature Conservancy of the Manitoba region. So she came from Winnipeg, Manitoba to work with the Nature Conservancy staff in Saskatchewan. And so that created, some opportunities there too for the organization. The Saskatchewan staff had one interpretation on what preparation of fire guards should look like versus what Julie does in Manitoba in her tallgrass prairie sites. And so there had been some work that had to be done the day before by a couple of staff and to go out there and prep the site. But So it was decided to proceed with those 2 units that day. The fog lifted at about noon. Sun came out. RH was still fairly high, but we decided to roll on out. So I don't know, Matt or Kody, which one wants to start first with your ops?
I'll touch on mine just real quick. Moira, she was burn boss for our division, and so yet again, both Julie and her, that's 2 new additional burn bosses. So we're coming into day 3 with 2, 4, 6 new burn bosses.
Yeah. So within our divisions, we weren't building consistency with any burn bosses. Everybody was working for a new boss every day, which is good. But yeah, you're not building a lot of redundancy within your team because everybody's in a new role every day. So, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, sorry, I was eating a cookie. So, no, we got in there, and then was that her first burn boss, or had she bossed a few in the city prior?
Yeah, she had burn boss a few in the city prior. She had done one last fall after TREX. She did one, and then there was another one that she had done along the riverbank as well. But in those burns, though, her and I were working very closely. Like, she'd burn boss, but I'd be right beside her, or be line lead for her, kind of thing. And so this time I wasn't there. So, I was there. I was there, but not there, kind of thing. So for this one, she had to step up. Also, it was her largest unit as well. I believe the full unit at Hyde was about 15 acres. And so for Moira, that's a huge unit within the middle of the city of Saskatoon as well, right? So
Yep. And then, me and her had some really good talks going into it. We looked at the unit, we looked at the wind direction, obviously, because of the smoke sensitivity, and we had a really good plan going in. We were fighting that drying effect. I'll be the first to admit, that urban interface stuff, like in the middle of town, I'm not nearly as experienced in that. So I had a lot of, learning opportunity myself in there, and then talking with everybody, and, everybody had different experience, and there's a little more urban interface experience in our crew than I had, originally thought there was, which was really neat to get those perspectives from some of those people. But we did get out there, had a great plan, had a really good briefing. We talked, just those briefings got better and better. I think our burn bosses, they heard the things they liked out of the previous day, and then they added to what they already wanted to talk about. So that was really good going into it. And so we got there, sun came out, RH was coming down. I mean, our humidity, it didn't get super low, but it did get down to that, 50% marker, give or take. I think we were maybe low at 53 or something like that. But we got on site, it was 73%. And then by the time, we had our talk and everybody got through, we had already dropped into the low 60s, creeping into the 50s. And, so we were pretty excited. We knew we had fire we were going to put fire on the ground. We didn't know the effects. We still had some clouds. The sun was poking in and out, like I just said. But I wasn't thinking we were going to have that lift pattern that we had with the smoke. And so we were really counting on that southwest wind to shoot it up the gap between all the houses over that natural system that's been put in place there. And wind felt good. Kestrel was reading the right direction, everything. So, we got broke out and we did a couple test fires right on the line, and we saw that, it was not as dry. I was walking through it. I had my crew walk through. One of our members, I like to walk through a unit, see how wet my boots get. That's just something how I measure, what's still on the ground, how much time do we have to dry, stuff like that. A couple of the other ones were like, well, I just like to, get down on a knee and see how wet my pant gets. And, I thought that was a kind of interesting take to see how much moisture was in the grass after a rain or a fog event or something like that. But anyways, we found out very quickly that backing fire was not going to happen. Flanking fire was a big maybe, and head fire was definitely going to work in parts of it, but it was still really patchy going out by itself. So, we took a big step, really pushed some people, and I came up to the group and they said, we blacked out the bottom corner, the south, or was that the south or the north, Renny? The north side.
The north side, yeah.
Yep, we blacked out the north side of the unit, so we had a catcher's mitt. we looked at our tie-in spots in the cattails. We knew we had a good, spot to tie in and get everything secure. And once we got that done, people got to practice and implement some of those ignition patterns that Kody and I had talked about. And, we did stress the importance is, it's training. We're practicing these ignition patterns, but, we need to do them effectively and quickly and professionally, as the public is still around this site and it is so sensitive. So we got that blacked out, and everybody goes, what's the plan? And we had already made one. And so Moira came in and said, we're going to get a bunch of igniters, and we're going to lay, as wide as we can get them, the most torches, and we're going to send them all the way up down to the south, and, put as much heat on the ground as we can to get as much, consumption and smoke in the air and go in the right direction while we still have our wind. And so, everybody kind of questioned and was like, well, how many torches? And I just flat out said, all of them. You find a torch, let's get it on the site. And they were, a little surprised maybe. And so I think we ended up with 7 or 8 torches. Everybody was spread out in the unit. And once everybody was set, we knew the plan. We knew how to walk in the straight line. Depending on how that fire was going to carry, we can adjust left to right, but we don't want to box anybody in, get anybody trapped by the fire. So I was out there in the middle with them. Both of our crew leaders were out in the middle with the igniter, so everybody had the option, or had somebody to support them in the case of something went sideways or whatever. But we also went over our lookouts, situations. We went over our escape routes, our safety zones. So we had a lot of that already set up in place, and people were very comfortable with it. We know we checked with everybody, and there's a lot of confidence, of course, coming into it. And we ended up igniting and taking off, and just our luck. As soon as we took off, we made it halfway down the unit, and the wind started shifting more to the southeast, waffling between that southwest-south and then moving southeast. And of course, once we had any sort of easterly component, the smoke was starting to go in the direction we really can't have it going. So I believe, Renny, you were still on site. You were outside of the unit.
Yes, I was.
Yep. You were outside of the unit, and you were kind of watching those critical areas, and you called it out. Down to the burn boss saying, hey, the smoke's kind of turning and it's laying, kind of starting to bend towards the buildings. And burn boss made that call. We had a pinch point really close to where we were at. She said, once we get there, let's cut it off and close it down. And I'd say it's a very good thing we did, because that smoke did bend a little farther than we were, anticipating it would. And so if we would have kept going, we would have, potentially caused a negative impact on a lot more, a lot of things. And so that was a very good call, great learning experience, that, just because we already have fire in the ground, you don't have to, in that situation, we had the ability to cut it off and shut it down. And we did so, and it was super, super effective, I think, in mitigating our smoke and stuff like that, and then keeping that public perception, in a good, positive manner of fire on the ground, and, even in the city. And we were able to get some black, on the ground, so people can get used to that idea of, we're going to have, implement fire as a management tool. So it's not a bad thing. Fire is not the scary thing that some might think it is, right? So that was how that operation kind of ended. Kind of let it burn together, and once there was, most of the fire was out. There's a couple spots that were peeling around. We took advantage of having the large crew and getting out there and putting out any of that smoke and flame to finish it off, and just totally get the fire contained and all clear and mopped up. So that was great. And then Renny, you actually came over to us, and we had a face-to-face. All three of us did, and we, what's this wind doing? Why is it southeast? Our fuel isn't as cured as we thought it was. It's not drying out as well. What is it worth? Is it worth going to the next unit? Because we had these resources, all these people in place that were, wanting to put fire in the ground. So we took a drive. We went and checked out the next unit, the Donna. I'm sorry, Renny, could you repeat that park name?
Yeah. Donna Berkmeyer.
Watertown.
We're trying to make directions too.
Sure. Adding a stop at Watertown in South Dakota, United States.
So
I've been to Watertown.
Yeah, looks like a hotel stop for us. So we went to the next site and we evaluated. It was still pretty green. It was next to the ball fields. We thought there might have been some irrigation that had happened before they winterized the lines that could have kept that field greener, longer, unlike what we saw outside of town on the previous day. And, the wind over there was still southwest. So, it was being funneled maybe more by the houses or something like that. And so we made the call that, let's bring the crew here. Let's maybe, reevaluate, but check some things out and maybe put some fire on the ground. And, we got the crew there successfully mobilized with, all the equipment we needed. And, another quick briefing. And that was one thing I forgot to mention, second day. I said we did good transition, but once again, those transitions, from home base, from the compound to the burn unit to compound burn unit, transitioning between burn units, that was getting better and better, faster and faster. Things were staying fire ready. People were rehabbing when they were, had downtime. So, super positive, outlook on how that was going and just the improvement. But we made a plan. We had a really small strip of grass between the soccer and the baseball field, and we lit it off as a test fire, a test plot. It was super contained. It had no contiguous fuel outside of the unit. Once we got that fire on the ground, the smoke was going in the right direction, but consumption was essentially horrible. I mean, we were not getting anything to carry fire. 3 or 4 torches dragging around that unit, and we were not meeting any of the goals that were laid out, any of the ecological goals, aesthetic goals, anything like that we wanted to get done. And so, we could have sat there, we could have drug torches, and it was just a long conversation that we had back and forth, for a little while. Like, we have the resources, we could put fire on the ground, but is it worth it? And end of the day, we determined it was not worth it, and we shut down the fire, no-go the rest of the operation. Plain and simple, it sucks, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we know together that we've all had to do it before. Kody's had a little more stress in that situation maybe than others, but we came out of it, especially after AAR. People learned and said that they were almost glad we stopped, just because they got to see that just because you have the people there ready to go, wanting to do it, doesn't mean you have to go if you're not meeting those objectives that you've very clearly laid out in your planning process. So I thought that was really good. Obviously we like putting fire in the ground, but I was really happy that we made that right decision not to push the envelope, and we all say, one bad move can ruin a fire program, and we didn't want to take that one bad move. So that was good there. And that pretty much wraps up that. And then you left us, Renny, and you head down to Dundurn, right?
Yeah. And I was heading down there. I saw the smoke off in the distance. I was about 15 miles away and I could see the smoke. So, yeah, but I'll let Kody talk about his operation there. So,
basically a completely different operation than what Bravo was dealing with. So we had a site that it was on sand and it had been grazed. So, very little fuel loading, other than, I had some snowberry and some of that wolf willow, and then it was the first site that we'd burned that had the creeping juniper on it. And the cows don't really affect that creeping juniper or those thicker brush areas, just because they can't plow their way in there like they might want. And then, as we lit this unit, it also really spoke to, the drought conditions that the current region was in. And I purposely talked early in the morning about 1-hour fuels, 10-hour fuels, 100-hour fuels, and 1,000-hour fuels, and how those fine fuels will react to that humidity without such a lag time. It takes shorter time for a period for them to get damp, and it also takes a shorter time period for them to dry out. But those bigger fuels, like your logs, sticks, logs, things like that, even though it might rain, you can still light them. And that's what we were seeing was in the aspen groves and those brushier fuels, it really wanted to burn. And we got good consumption, and then we ended up having a lot of mop up. out in the grass where it had been grazed pretty hard, we had that super patchiness, and that real heterogeneic ignition, which is good. From that ecological standpoint, it was fantastic. And then Julie was the burn boss, her first burn in Saskatchewan, which was a big step for her, a big step for NCC Saskatchewan. And then, she had different NCC people. We put them purposely in those line lead roles on that burn to stretch their capacity. And both of them were first time. One of them was a first time line lead, and she did great. She made good decisions. She kept her line moving. And then, the other line kept moving. They had to fight it a little bit more to get ignition, actually to make some stuff black. And that line, it really challenged them mentally to accept being able to walk away from that line knowing that it didn't have solid black.
Yeah.
And, and I talked through that face to face with people is, if you run a torch 3 or 4 times through it and it doesn't light, you have to be comfortable moving on, because you can't force something to light that's not going to light, no matter how much gas and diesel you put on the ground. So we got it down, wrapped it up, and then we had a nice little playground. We had some aerial ignition devices, a couple of flare guns, and then the pyro shot that everybody was able to take a shot with, see how that could be beneficial for interior ignition, where you can save some steps, but also not put people in bad places. Being able to shoot around into, up on top of a hill or down into a deep valley, a deep sand bowl or something, to get fire down there without having to physically walk down there and light it with a torch. Some other things I want to note is we had some great neighbor relations happening, and then the local fire department showed up, and the local Army base showed up, just to kind of see what we were doing, see how the fire operation was going, because fire hadn't been in that neighborhood. They're not used to that smoke and that smoke culture and fire culture. And Renny pulled up about the same time that the fire department was sitting there, and I don't know if his hair stood up on the back of his neck when he was driving up and saw the big fire truck or not, but those guys got out and they're like, "This is awesome! You guys got it in the box and you got it." So Renny, you talked with him a little bit more face to face while I was running around teaching some ignition and stuff. So you want to talk about that interaction with the crew, with that fire department crew?
Yeah, it was, like you said, hair standing up the back of my neck, right? So saw both trucks, and I knew one was the military wildland crew, and I knew they were probably going to come out and observe, and then the other one was the volunteer fire department for the local municipality in Dundurn, and I figured they'd be curious, but I just never know when you see them. So I talked to the military, and they were just super keen to learn and watch. They deal with a lot of wildland fire on their base. And CFB Dundurn is sort of the munitions base for Canada, right? And so they're always, playing with their ordnance kind of thing. And so they're always starting and creating wildland fires and putting it out. But we've started some discussions with the environmental lead for the base, and she's really interested in actually using targeted prescribed fire as a management tool. And so the wildland team there, they were really keen on learning from us and talking to us when we were there about why we're using fire, how we use fire, the different techniques we're using, because they're used to just putting out the fire, and they were quite fascinated watching about how to start the fires kind of thing, right? So that was good, really good discussion. And we both Dinyar with the Fire Exchange and then Matthew with the Nature Conservancy have met with them once now, and probably there'll be future meetings with them. And then to the volunteer fire department, the local crew, that was a real interesting discussion. Turns out one of the volunteer firefighters that came, he actually works in the city of Saskatoon with the fire department there, but lives out of town in the municipality and works volunteers in the local fire department. And so he had already heard about the fire at the Hyde Park fire and about the smoke situation. Because where that fire was, the smoke actually had gone towards the Saskatoon Fire Department local station right there, so he had heard about it right away. But he's a former wildland firefighter out of British Columbia, and so his unit, or their wildland truck, he carries 2 drip torches. And so he's done lots of burnouts over the years, and he's a big proponent of prescribed fire, and probably one of the few volunteer fire departments in Saskatchewan that actually, knows what a drip torch is and prescribed fire. And so him and the fire chief were there, and we had a great discussion and super keen. And they're really interested in becoming involved at the next TREX next year. They would like to send a couple of people. They actually, one of the things that we have with the fire exchange is we've created an online course with the University of Saskatchewan, just sort of the basics on grassland prescribed fire. They want to sign up all their volunteer firefighters on that course, all 12 of them, and take the course and then come out to TREX next year, and also look at opportunities to burn with the partners in the Saskatoon region within the municipality and burn out some of their troublesome spots that they have in the area. So, from not just the ecological benefits of the burn that happened at the Nature Conservancy property, but also that community relations and that partnership development. I think that was even the bigger win for that on that site. So, big first for Nature Conservancy having their first burn in the region, and second is having that inter-provincial relationship with Julie being their burn boss, and then developing that local relationship. That was just, for me, that was the highlight of the day, right? So
yeah, and I think you gotta also mention that it's not the first time of the week that you've had people talk to you, or you talk to people near our fires that after seeing what we did, they want to get involved, like as in even their land, right, or neighboring your land. Like, well, I want to see mine burn now because you guys just did that so successfully, so professionally, and safely, and they want to partner up, right? So you can cross that fence, and then that wasn't just local neighbors, right? We have people that came to our event. We're very partial to the man now. The community pasture man, old Sam. He got to be involved, and he's we talked to him all week. We loved working with him, and he's super excited about fire now, and got to see some of those presentations and stuff, and we want to get fire on the ground in his in his pastures and stuff. So you have something on that?
Well, I know. I think and with Sam there with his community pasture. Where I live, that community pasture is in the municipality where I live, right? And the volunteer fire, quite a few of the volunteer firefighters where I live are also patrons to that community pasture, right? And so, yeah, I think next year that community pasture will be maybe one of our sites for TREX, right? Because Sam's super keen as the pasture manager, and I know Brian, who's the chair of the community pasture, he's super keen on burning as well. So yeah, it was super exciting, right? I think we're definitely going to see some of these future partnerships really come out of these TREX events, right? So, and yeah, you mentioned about landowners too. I was sharing every day pictures on social media and stuff, and sort of a highlight of each day, and I had several people reach out to me and say, hey, I got some land, or I got this pasture, or I'm on this acreage. If you ever need a site to burn, you can come and burn at my place, right? So, yeah, really exciting, really exciting.
Yeah, huge barriers being broke down, for good progress in that fire culture world.
Yeah, and
yeah.
And I think, Renny, you're going to start seeing it where there's the potential that the need is going to outpace how fast we can train, and that's all the more importance of why, especially the Saskatchewan region, especially adjacent to Saskatoon, needs to build that fire capacity. So, you guys as a whole can have 2 or 3 or 4 different operations going on the same day, because your fire seasons do seem like they're very limited in the window. Very limited spring window, very limited fall window. So, out of a given year, if you have 10 burn days and you're all coming together to burn as one, you're not able to cover as much ground. So if you can build that capacity and have 2 or 3 or 4 burn bosses that have stable crews, stable equipment to pull those off, that's building that fire need. And then, it's a giant jump when the neighbors are actually coming to you, asking you to burn, rather than you having to go to them and kind of beg them to, hey, can we at least cross your fence? It'll make our burn easier if we burn a portion of yours. But if they see it, they see that, I kind of call it the publicity line of, nice straight black lines. There's not a lot of bump outs, not a lot of slops. It signifies that you're doing it right. You're passionate about your work, you're specialist, you're thorough, and putting that fire where it needs to be when it needs to be there. And I want to touch base a little bit back on Bravo, shutting down that burn, and like Matt mentioned, shutting down a burn is quite possibly the hardest thing that a burn boss will ever do, because you have all your chess pieces in play. Everybody is wanting to burn, everybody's looking to you to burn, but you ultimately have that last decision. And I put a PowerPoint together that I was not able to do this week, but it kind of goes through the whole process of you pick out what do you want to burn, and then you figure out your burn unit design, you figure out your ecological goals, and that's typically what drives us as far as what units we want to burn. And then within those ecological goals, you set your prescription or your prescribed fire goals, and then you tailor the amount of equipment, the amount of personnel, and all of that to meet that need. And then you do go through the whole planning process, write your plan, get your fire prep done, and then kind of the last question is today the day? Are the ground conditions right? Are the crew conditions right? And then even the time of day, are we getting too late in the day? And that's what happened to me earlier this spring is, we ended up kept tripping up on things, and it was getting to about 1 o'clock, and we didn't have fire on the ground for almost a 700 acre unit. And I was like, if we light it now, we're going to be burning until 8 or 9 o'clock. And, people had already worked from 8 until 1 at that point. They were kind of tired, and we were in day 3 of our burn week down in Iowa. And, one of the toughest decisions I've ever had to make was to say, we're gonna pull the plug. Today's not the day. And very, very stressful, especially when it's your unit and it's your marquee unit. And I'm very proud of Maura and Bravo Division for supporting her in that decision to shut it down. There will be other days, there will be other years, that our prairie, especially our prairie ecosystems, they're very, very resilient. If you miss a year, you're not gonna lose that prairie. If you miss two decades, your invasives might be having a significant impact. But at the end of the day, we have to be safe. And like Matt said, one bad day can really change a whole program, and even more importantly, it could change somebody's career in the fire world. So firefighter safety, public safety is number one, and then that giant public perception of we're doing it for the right reasons, not just to simply make things black.
Yeah. Well, and Kody, I came down to your cooperative burn week last year, and I was on that crew when you made that call, and not to go, right? And I think everyone on the team, felt how hard it was for you, but we also agreed that you made the right decision, right? So, it's a tough choice, right? I've had to call off burns too, and it's tough, right? You're sitting there ready to roll, put all that work in, But yeah, I totally hear that. Yeah, it's tough for people, but but it's good for people to see that too. I think from a training experience, I think that was really good to see that at TREX here in Saskatoon. That no, conditions aren't right. We have to shut her down, right? And I think that's important for people to see, because you get that rock'em sock'em kind of attitude, right? If everything works perfectly good every day, people could get complacent too, right? So I think it's a good training experience as well for people.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess you guys got wrapped up.
Yep.
Patchy burns, it was good for everybody to see. And so, we all got back, IMT meeting. It's probably worth mentioning, we're day 3, day 4 of these meetings, since we started the day before operations, and, we're getting really efficient, or a lot more efficient, making, those decisions. Everybody gives their quick updates from the day, and then we start going right into that planning side of things, the operations for the next day. People are really, everybody's in their phones looking at the weather, seeing what even is going to make sense, and so that's pretty cool. We've had plenty of IMT meetings, in our neck of the woods where, we're day 3, day 4 in. We've been running hard, pushing 4 divisions, stuff like that. And we come into IMT meeting and we just want to sit down and take a nap. And sometimes there's, just the laid back people don't want to make a decision. And I thought that the team all week just kept improving.
Yes.
And
Yes.
really pushing forward in a hard, good fashion, even when they were tired and stuff like that. So, so finished up Wednesday, day 3, day 4, we found out again that the weather changed and we have another opportunity to burn, and like Cody said at the beginning, we thought we had one day and one day only, and we're going to have a lot of classroom time. And me and Cody were looking at each other like, what on God's green earth are we going to do to break up that classroom period, right? I mean, these people are willing to learn and sit in the classroom, but Renny saw it all week. Me and Cody sat in the back of the room when we weren't up front, and I don't know if we sat in our chairs for more than 10-20 minutes at a time before we're up and walking around pacing in the back. It's hard to sit still, especially these people in fire that they're very active. They want to be doing something. So pleasantly surprised that we had a good weather window, knowing that we could go out to the old Beaver Run and take on a couple more pretty big units. We had 3 units on the table, right?
Yep.
The East reconstruction, or what do you call it, Renny? What's your guys' term?
We use restorations to reconstruct it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the West Restoration Unit is what Bravo took on. The East Restoration, we ended up building into Alpha's unit. That was what was your unit name?
Sand Dunes.
The Sand Dunes unit. I'm going to take a second. That is Beaver Creek is an very, very cool. Beaver Run. Did I just say Beaver Creek? Beaver Creek.
It's Beaver Creek.
I call it the wrong thing every time. All right, doesn't matter. It's Beaver Creek, people.
No worries.
So Beaver Creek is super cool site. Like a lot of sand, and on that specific site there is the smooth goose foot.
Yeah, you got it.
Oh, we got it. Smooth goose foot. It's a an annual plant, species of concern that was monitored and found or discovered on that site.
Yep. And then the tiger beetle.
Oh, and the tiger beetle
within those sand boils, those sand dunes.
Yep. So has some cool history there, and get the disturbance, the fire on the ground. I mean, I believe Renny, you were telling me. You can get into the details on that, but we had 3 units on the table. We took both divisions there, knowing that we were going to be working relatively close to each other, but we knew we had a good wind window. We knew it was going to be a drier day. We know it got down into the high 20% in the relative humidity.
Yeah, we hit 25%, which was not exactly predicted the night before.
Yeah,
but
we
then
felt like
that early
mid-30s.
morning forecast, it was like, we're going to be rocking and rolling, Highest fuel load units that we'd seen to date, and the hottest, the warmest and the driest that we'd seen to date.
So stars are aligning for some, pretty high and good fire activity. But obviously we know there's consequences to that. If the fire wants to burn, you're going to have a little hard time containing it, potentially, with just depending on things like, the unit design, the fire guards, the fire breaks, all that stuff. So we did take advantage of combining part of the East the east unit into the sand one. I can't even remember the name already. Sand dunes. Man, I'm horrible at this.
And I'll even take it a step back. You know, we had good discussion that night before of, because all these units were connected, of do we do it as one burn unit, which would have been by far Rennie's biggest burn unit. It would have been just a tick over 70 acres if we burned all three as one. And we kind of kicked it around and kind of made the decision of no, we want to do it broken up into those smaller units, because that gives more opportunities for more firefighters on the fire line. Everybody wants to do a bigger unit, but that wasn't the objective for the week. Our objective was training, repetitions, and exposing people to new things and putting people in those new roles. So we went with having three separate units, just splitting up that east one and adding a little bit of a dog leg onto the sand dunes, just so we had a secure entire east perimeter to tie into the road, rather than having kind of an island in the middle. So we took I think it was 32 acres, and we bumped it up to probably 42. We probably added about 10 acres to it, something like that, just to kind of square it up a little bit, make it a little bit more of a button it up a little bit.
Make it a little easier, not having to fight an interior line that you were going to burn back off of later. And
and then we were going to take that center unit after Bravo had finished the west, Alpha had finished the sand dunes, and then we had a sliver in the middle, and we said, well, let's use this as our suppression exercises to do that direct initial attack, let people see the fire, how they can attack that fire, and use some of the skills that they'd kind of learn throughout the week of utilizing their tools, and really put it to work, really bring everything together to that peak for the week. And then also, capping off a 70-acre day on one site that was all continuous.
Absolutely. So before we get into the full details of the operations, Renny, let's you want to give a little description there of Beaver Creek and that history and some of that stuff, like with the species of concern and everything that we talked about.
So that site's quite unique as well. Similar to like Wanuskewin, with it has a creek flowing through it, and then borders onto the South Saskatchewan River on the west side. And it's owned by Meewasin Valley Authority, where I work, and we have an interpretive center on that site as well, which is open to the public. We got a lot of people out hiking and everything. And also we do school programs as well, and we run grade 3 programs, and pretty much every single grade 3 student in Saskatoon region comes through Beaver Creek. And so great opportunity too to educate the public about fire as well, and school kids, right? So, and then in the sand dune burn unit, we have in the region around Saskatoon, we have several sand dune dependent species that require these shifting sands in these sand dunes for their habitat. So like the smooth goosefoot, which is an annual plant, requires that shifting sand to scarify the seed to cause seed germination and create habitat. And then the same thing with the Gibson's big sand tiger beetle, which we haven't found it on that site yet, but we figure it's there because we have adjacent nearby sites like 2 miles away that have it, so it's probably there. And that too requires those shifting sand dunes. The smooth goosefoot in that the big sand dune in the middle of the unit, we've been working with Environment Canada and monitoring the smooth goosefoot population for the last 6 years. And this year we actually couldn't find any. None of the annual plants showed up. And we're talking with the species at risk biologist. She said, you really need to do something in here to disturb this, right? And I had been working, in back of, every year I've written a burn plan to burn that unit, but just never able to pull it off. Never had the resources, never had the skills, never had the equipment, never had the right weather conditions, never had the confidence to do this, right? We've done some targeted grazing in it to try and remove some of the vegetation, but with sheep you can only do so much. And so the stars aligned, and we were able to pull off a burn in there. So, it was 8 years in the making. And, if I look back 8 years ago when I started with Meewasin to now, there's no way in hell we could have pulled off that burn 8 years ago, just with our skill set, right? And, but yeah, this year it worked. So I don't know, Kody, I'll let you talk about operations on that one.
Yeah. Kind of a very unique topography in this one, with those big, deep, steep sand boils, sand dunes in the middle, and then, mode breaks pretty much all the way around, and then a road on the south end of that east reconstruction or restoration. So we lined up our crews with what our forecasted wind direction was, and, started in the northeast corner, crews working south, crews working west, and then we utilized that pyro shot to really try to diversify the ignition on the interior in those dunes and make it safe to get those lit and disturb as much as we can, as much as we could for that smooth goosefoot. And so worked through it. We pretty much had a westerly wind. It was forecast to be southwest. Pretty much our wind stayed westerly for dominantly half to 3/4 of the operation. And then the wind was supposed to go straight south, but as it had been the rest of the week, instead of going straight south, it decided to go northwest. So we had to adjust kind of the tempo, the pace that a couple of lines were moving. Had to secure some lines faster than I think line leads were comfortable with, but that was fine. We had the pieces in play to make that happen, and work things up. Close the box in that southwest corner, and a good learning experience for a lot of people on that, because I think they closed the box a little sooner than what they should have. By that time, Matt's division was done, and he'd actually came over to kind of sneak a peek and see what we were up to over on ours, and I was glad he was. We had a minor slop over. It pushed through a bunch of brush, and I think, Matt, you said it was 6-8 tall flame lengths above about 10-foot brush, so it was really cranking through there, but we couldn't get anything to back through it, but you could get it to head fire through it really strongly. So that pushed out. It was a great learning experience for people to use that anchor flank technique for putting out a slop over or a spot. And we ended up running it right into the black of where we'd cut across that east restoration, almost like we'd planned it. We didn't plan it, but that's how it looked at the end of the day. And when we went into doing a little mop up to make sure our unit was secure, and then an AAR before we went into more mop up, and then into the suppression exercises. But a lot of great things happening. People really, really stretching themselves as far as what they had learned and what they were comfortable with. And then, we had to push the tempo. We had to push the pace because the weather was pushing it a little bit for us. Another, like Renny alluded to, one thing I was not ready for was the amount of traffic that was utilizing Beaver Creek, whether it was just day users that were planning on going there, or people that were coming to snoop on the smoke since we were in such high visibility of the highway. I don't know. I can't really answer that, but it seemed like whoever came in, stayed a little bit. They didn't just come in, turn around, and leave. So.
Yeah, and there's lots of people, if they were driving in, they were asking questions and engaging people and stuff. And, and I always write in my plan, if, need be, have a public information person standing there and talking to people. And I should have pulled in one of our interpreters or something to be at the gate to talk to people, because there was a lot of good questions. And, and a lot of people were interested, right? But they're used to seeing, black on that site, right? So I think that people are just fascinated with that wind shifts too. I since I was roving around on a quad, I was able to go and check on the highway a few times. There's an adjacent highway, and we were making sure no smoke was sitting on that highway, right? Because it's a fairly busy highway. But we were lucky it was lifting just in time to go across the road. What was interesting too was when your slop over occurred, I'd actually walked into the middle of the burn unit to take a look at the ecological effects of the fire, right, and see if we met our prescription. And so I went into that sand dune bowl, and Kody had talked about using the power shot to light up that sand dune bowl to try and knock back some of the creeping juniper and some of the reedgrasses. And we met our ecological objectives with that burn. It was just exactly perfect, exactly what we wanted and what we needed. So it was quite interesting to see that. And so I was in the middle of that when the slop over occurred, so I didn't even know there was a slop over. But it was really fascinating to see those fire effects.
Yeah. So I guess I'll start on Bravo. We had a ton of public interaction on our line. Our unit bordered that main parking lot, the big turnaround. We had school bus there with a bunch of kids. We had some parents with their kids, stuff like that. Ian, he was one of our public information officers for the week on the IMT, and it just worked out that he was on that line that went by and hung out on the roadside and on that parking lot area for a while as the other team was kind of working their line with that more westerly wind. So that worked out really great, and at least our favor. A lot of people got to talk to him. I'll say it right now, Ian's got an incredible voice. Very, very deep, he can project very well, but he's really good at talking to people, getting them involved. And so, there's one dad and his kid that, his little boy that were hanging out, and they basically just, safe distance away out of the smoke, but they stuck with the firing operations almost the entire way. That little kid just was so happy. He's like, this is cool. I don't want to leave. And I got to talk to him for a second. And just a bunch of people were just super happy and having a great time watching our op. I will say we drew the long straw in a good way. Our unit was super secure on three of the four sides. We had beat down trails with dirt in them. We had roads, we had parking lots, gravel trails, and then just one really big mow line. And so that made our operation a lot easier. We had a lot of opportunity to play out in our unit. Of course, Bravo was relatively jealous of Alpha from the day before, having all the aerial pyrotechnics. So we did get to utilize having the flare gun with us and shooting the different types of flares, the ones the stubbies that roll across the ground and put fire in lines, and then the long shot aerial ones that launch them way out in the unit and start a fire. So we were able to make a plan, and I guess we definitely didn't touch on this operational period at the start of the day or the night before on our burn boss, right? So Dr. Eric Lamb was the burn boss for the second time of the week on Alpha. He built some confidence up throughout the week, things he liked to see, and then Kody can retouch on that in a minute. But when we were trying to find a burn boss for the West unit, me and Kody were poking Renny, hey, we'll do it, we'll do it. Mostly joking, but pretty serious. But hey, lead a burn in Canada, that'd be kind of cool.
Mostly serious.
Yeah, but no, but we were running through the list, and we were just trying to figure out who can do it. And I know, Renny, you were itching to be like, just let me do it. And out of nowhere, Dr. Dale comes in and he goes, I'm doing it. It wasn't like, I could do it. It wasn't, well, maybe think about me. It was like, I'm doing it. You don't have a choice. I'm ready to rock this. And I mean, we even left, we didn't even leave the compound that morning. And, we had our division breakout, and I told Dale after, I said, there's no reason for me to be here anymore. And he just looks at me and he goes, I said like 6 things. You took a whole division. You already have a plan made for everything. You got everybody lined out. Everybody's comfortable. Everybody's happy. Like, with what's going on. They know their assignments, they know everything, and we haven't even hit the site yet. That's pretty advanced in my mind, getting it all just basically drawn out except for looking at the unit. And Dale was ready to rock, and we can't say it enough on that day. I mean, the man was on fire, and not literally, of course, but he was really putting those boots on the ground, making sure people knew what they were doing, making the decisions clear and concise. Like, there was no question in what we had going on. If somebody said, hey, should I do this? It was, yeah, absolutely, yes, this is what you're doing, or, let's not do that yet. Like, there was no hesitations. It was awesome. It was super successful. And our unit just fed up, our division fed on that all day long. Like, great leadership was creating great morale in the firefighters, and everybody was wanting to push and get that, that piece done safely and have a good pace that made sense. And that also helped with our 2 new line leaders, one new line leader and 1 repeat line leader, building their confidence in their decisions and, feeling like they were really secure and set up for a successful day with their the crew working underneath them. And so I thought that was just super great. We did get on site. Dale wanted to go recon the unit, so me and him hopped in a UTV. We looked around it. We saw our concern spots, and had a plastic wellhead on the internal part of the unit. We got all that identified, and a handful of our team utilized that recon the unit. Something we do in Iowa is everybody on the fire gets to go see the entire unit, or at least their line, where they know they're starting to where they're ending. And that's super important, so they don't have the questions. You're not guessing what's ahead of you. You know what's coming, so you can adapt and overcome that stuff and be prepared, right, all the way through the entire operation. And so a couple of the crew members decided they did want to go recon. We kind of gave it an option instead of a demand. And it was really good, I think, for the people that didn't recon it to hear that in AAR. Like, that recon that I did prior to this op, it made it way easier for me, right? They were happy they did it. They stressed the importance of it. So I think that's gonna, keep developing in people as they go, so they're not questioning, because we could see each other the whole time, unlike Alpha, where you guys got spread out and you couldn't see the other line working. But yeah, so we basically just gave a couple people the torch that hadn't touched it for the week, and just built a bunch of black on the downwind side. Super fast, a bunch of different, ignition patterns, testing the things out. And, I put more miles on that day, just walking back and forth, because everybody was, just firing on all cylinders. It was great seeing that happening. And then once we secured the whole side of that unit, the downwind side, we utilized the mow line and everything. They got some, putting out the suppression side of things all in one deal. And we were fortunate enough for Dale to have that, the flare gun with us. And we were able to run every single person on our division through the operation of that. And then, changing the flares in and out, which ones people were shooting, and making those ignition patterns, in that unit, the super diverse ignition patterns. So I think, Renny, it'll be super interesting for you guys when you're out on that site, seeing where stuff grows, how it grows. I mean, you're pretty dialed in on where those patterns were happening, so you know what to look for, obviously, or where to look, I should say. But yeah, I mean, shoot, once we got everybody, through that gun, we put it away, got it back secured, and it's safe boxing. We wrapped that unit up. We had a little bit of a challenge on the line where that little blue stem, flashy, hot, warm season component was mowed into the line. Really a good teaching moment to just reiterate where that wet line probably could go, and so you're not having to fight as hard and using the correct ignition pattern to keep things from popping onto your line and challenging you. But team jumped in, worked together great up there, and they, it didn't get outside the unit. Of course, we had your guys' burn unit from last year directly adjacent, so there was not a lot of receptive fuel outside. So even if it had gotten across the line in full, it would not have been a big deal. Containment would have been absolutely, easy as pie. It probably would have been easier than catching it within the mow break. But, great situation, great learning experience for all those guys in that situation. A lot of good talking about that in our after action review. And then, we closed that box, and we closed it fast. I mean, little Rachel was the one running the torch, and she don't have very long legs, but that girl can move when she's happy. And she was just cruising down that line, tied in that corner. Biggest smile of anybody, smallest person on the crew by far. Her shooting that gun, her ripping that torch. I mean, she was ecstatic. So that was pretty great to see. You know, we didn't know if we were going to be able to be operational in the field, actually firing on Friday. We knew high winds were coming. So, I think a lot of people you're making the most of that last day, thinking there might not be an opportunity. We're going to burn tomorrow, or the next day, obviously. So that was just great. Everybody came together. We got it tied up, and that obviously freed me up to go, eavesdrop on Alpha and get a play for a little bit finally for the week. So, yeah, I see. You were bumping back and forth. What else you got to add on that?
Yeah, it was quite interesting going back and forth, and then also interacting with the public as well, right? And yeah, that little kid that you were talking to, I talked to him as well, and put my helmet on him as well, and told him, don't start fires kind of thing. But yeah, the kid was just fascinated, right? And I even stopped in at our interpretive center and checked in with our interpreters just to see if they were getting any negative phone calls about the smoke and stuff, and nothing. They're just all positive. And it was my colleague was in the city at our compound, Meewasin compound, which is about 20 kilometers away. I guess in miles, it'd be 12 miles away. And she could see the plume of smoke when we started, or when we were burning the sand dune complex, right? And so she phoned me and said, "Hey, I could see you guys." And so, yeah, it was a really interesting day. We were running, two major fires, 200 yards apart, and we ended up with 70 acres burned. That's for my organization, that is a record. Number of acres burned in a given day. I'll say intentional acres burned in a given day, right? And so that's really phenomenal. And just watching the teams come together, from day one compared to day four, yeah, there was a few little hiccups and this and that, but like our burn program here in the Saskatoon region, looking at how things went on Thursday, we've come light years in the last 2 years. Like when we were doing burns, we'd maybe do 1 or 2 acres at a time. It'd be all flappers and water packs, and that's it. Now we have rolling stock. We have good equipment. We got, people that aren't scared to go in and do interior ignition, right? And then come out, or doing different patterns for ignition and holding and splitting up into two teams or two lines, right? So for me, that was seeing it all come together, the 2 years of TREX coming together with that day was really powerful. It was, that sand dune complex, I've wanted to burn it for 8 years, and just to see that happen and meeting those ecological effects that I wanted to meet being met, that was very powerful. Wish I could have been on the line too, but standing back at the 10,000 foot level, it was really fascinating to watch.
Absolutely, and I've, had the advantage of some pretty good teachers in my fire career so far, and some of those have pulled even when I'm the burn boss and have to be a part of the line. When we don't have the crew that we need, wearing those many hats, but. They've pulled me off the line after we knew we had security and pulled me away and, drove me around the section or whatever. And look what you're doing, see what's going on here, back up for a second. And I've always found that to be, more impactful and more developmental in how I operate, the more times I do stuff like that. So, I think that's a pretty big deal going hands off.
Yep.
So, all right, so we can finish out the operational period. Kody, let's you touch over the suppression thing, and then exercises, and then postal pizza, not a sponsor yet, for dinner out on site. Renny, you can hit on them, and the night ops, and then we can close down day 4.
Yeah, so we as Bravo finished up, Alpha was still mopping up. We transitioned all the Bravo into doing some suppression exercises in that in that east restoration that was between the two blocks that we just blacked out. And just lighting a good fire. It was getting right at sunset, right at dusk. Humidity was starting to come up, so fire wasn't really raging, but it was warm enough that you didn't want to stick your nose in there too soon.
No.
Good fuel load of a mix of brome and little blue stem. So we had some good flashy fuels that put out some good heat, some good flame lengths, and we sicked them in there with bladder bags, with leaf blowers, with tools, mix and match, so they could rotate through, have that hands-on effect of putting that fire out effectively with those tools, and then just getting repetitions. There was one young man in particular. I mean, I don't know how many reps he took, but every time he went in, he had a different tool, and which was great. And that'll be something that he'll take back and say, I like this tool and this fuel model. I don't like that tool. It didn't work. Especially in those shorter prairie grassland fuels. I mean, the leaf blowers are highly, highly effective, at least for the initial knockdown. If you compare that with those bladder bags and then a tool following, you can cover a lot of territory in a little while and be very thorough with it. So I think people saw that, and then like Matt said, we were rotating people through as they knock it out. Matt and I'd run around and light another little section, and we just kept doing that. And black was our byproduct of our training. Absolutely, on that unit, we didn't have a burn boss picked out for that unit. We didn't really need one, but we just kept burning a section at a time, and by the time we got done, we blocked out another 10 acres of good fire on the landscape there to connect those two blocks. So great stuff happening. Good conversations. Matt was there, and I was there, so we'd light a little section, and then we were available right there for people to ask us questions and talk through some of that stuff that people just wanted some time to process. So it was fantastic to work with everybody on those and just instill confidence in them as they did repetition after repetition, and then by the time we got done, it was full on dark, it was full on black, and then we ripped off probably 3 or 4 acres there at the end, put up a nice big orange glow on the horizon that everybody could see, I'm sure, for miles and miles on that landscape. And
and then that glow got a phone call. I got a couple phone calls from the Saskatchewan Fire Department just to confirm things were okay. So I think that glow was seen for quite a few miles. So
absolutely, Kody's going to jump out and grab some fuel while we're here, and I do know we're going kind of long running, so if you need to step out by any means, we can revisit the last couple of days or the last day, or if you want to get it done, we can keep going.
If you're up for keeping it going, let's keep it going.
Heck yeah, we just didn't want to, I guess I'm going to leave all this in the podcast, and we spent a lot of time this week. Obviously me and Kody spent a lot of time away from our families because we're so far away from home. Which. That's a hard thing, but, for the IMT, the local guys, it's also really, it takes a toll locally, for them and their families. So, we think it is, a pretty big deal. We didn't want to take you away, from the family time you had today after being so committed to this all week. I mean, that's, huge deal on that regard, being able to still step away and even bigger deal to your family, allowing you, to be a part of something bigger like that and be, put that impact on the landscape. I'm sure we got to meet a couple of your kids. We know that they love what you do, and we know that they know you. They love. I can't say this right. They know you love what you do, and it's very apparent, with them, and they're supportive of what you do. So that's that's a pretty incredible thing as well. Renny, if you want to take it and pound into the pizza and night ops real quick.
Yeah. So we had a caterer that catered the whole event for us. Local guy that runs a pizza truck and then also has a restaurant downtown Saskatoon just opened up near our office, and so Postal Pizza. And it was interesting, when he drove in with his pizza truck, he was coming along just as you were doing the suppression exercises, right? And so he stopped to take pictures of his truck with the flames in the background, right? And so he was throwing that out on Instagram and social media, right? And getting a lot of hits on social media. He has a fairly big following with his pizza truck. And then set up by our interpretive center, and as crews rotated through the suppression exercises, he was making fresh pizzas for people, right? And in the clay oven kind of thing attached to the truck, and serving pizza. And then that also, he was doing some social media posts with big flames in the background, and people and the firefighters going up and having pizza. So I think everyone really.
Oh, I got to plug them. I mean,
go ahead.
that was delicious pizza. Personal pizzas, perfect size, absolutely incredible. I probably should have ate 6 of them, but I limited myself to 1.
So that was a lot of fun. And and you mentioned the family kind of thing, so I'll sort of digress a little bit. My last 2 years during TREX, it was my daughter's birthday, right, during TREX. And so last year it was her 16th birthday. This year it was her 17th birthday. So I got her and her buddies, they had gone out for supper. And so I got them to stop by during the incident management team meeting kind of thing. And so everyone saying happy birthday to her and stuff. So, and a couple of her friends, her friend Ronnie, and I'm sure she'll listen to this podcast. I call her my groupie kind of thing. So she's super fascinated with the work that I do, right? So, but then out at Beaver Creek on the Thursday night, I had my son Salix come, and if you notice, plant names for the kids, right? So my wife's a biologist as well, so
yeah, it's perfect.
So he came out. Yeah, and so he came out. I invited him to come out to. He had a special delivery for Jeff Seiko, but we'll talk about that later. And so he definitely had to take pictures of his Chevy pickup truck with the flames in the background, right? So, and so that too, he had to do that. So one of the things we did too, after everyone ate supper, we decided to do a little bit of night ops, sort of show fire effects to people with the darkness, right? And so when we were down in Iowa, Carrie Hecker and I got to partake in some prescribed fires in the middle of the night kind of thing. And so we thought we'd give everyone a little bit of a show with some night operations. And so I did a 3-acre field adjacent to our interpretive center, adjacent to our road, adjacent to the road staff parking, adjacent to the brick trail coming up to the building. And so Kody wanted to give everyone that didn't have a chance to run drip torch an opportunity to burn. So Julie with Nature Conservancy in Manitoba never got a chance to run drip torch. Morgan with NCC Saskatchewan, who had spent a day doing site prep for the Dundurn property, she never got to run drip torch. And then myself as ICA never got to touch a drip torch either. So Kody wanted to do sort of a ring burn on the 3 sides because it's a triangle piece. So meeting together kind of thing on each side, one going each direction, and then use different ordnance to sort of do interior lighting kind of thing. However, didn't work quite as well as what we expected because I have been grazing that portion with my sheep every year. We use it as part of our sheep demonstration fields, and I also graze it fairly heavy to reduce the fuel risk around the building to protect our infrastructure. And I think my grazing met its objectives, so it was a little bit more difficult to light the fire. And then also the RH had popped up as well, right? So
yep. And not the show we were hoping for it to be, but lessons learned, right? We can develop a better unit for next year and hopefully take advantage of some night ops, right?
Oh yeah, I have some plans already for next year to do night ops on. So, but fun part for me was since Alex was there, I threw him in a Nomex suit, and he works as an apprentice in carpenter, so he had all his safety gear with him anyhow. And so just gave him a little bit of a chance to go play with the drip torch, right? So it was fun. I was, standing beside him, describing it, and got him going on that. Want to mention my uncle had been, when I started burning when I was 16, he had been with the University of Saskatchewan, and so I had burned with him, right? And so looking at this as third generation, hey? So, but what was funny though is my daughter, who had just had her birthday, she was all upset that he got to run drip torch and she never did, right? So she's trying to figure out a way for us to burn this weekend on our farm. So yeah, that's always the fun side of things, right?
Yeah, you get it.
Oh yeah, we'll burn. Don't worry. We'll burn something. We're a little bit redneck up here in Saskatchewan as well. We're just the same as you guys in Iowa. We're just as redneck, and we'll do some family fire.
Yeah.
My dad.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, and my dad has his own drip torch, right? So.
Perfect. Yeah.
We'll put it to use.
Building your family with fire. A very different fire family right there. In a good way. Well, perfect. Yeah, so we got that wrapped up. That was good. I think, the people were hoping for a bigger show, the one that stayed around. And I don't, no big deal, but we still got the pyro shot back out, and, people got to see the delay with the, the dragon eggs lighting up with the chemical reaction, and we got the flare gun back out and rolled some stubbies across. So we had a cool show of all the different stuff. It just, it didn't come together. So, you know what, if we're going to take a loss anywhere on the week, we'll take it there on this over the super successful stuff that we had in all of the other units, and even at that, it was not a loss by any means. But if that's our lowest point, then I think we did something right.
Yeah.
But so we got that wrapped up. We stayed up much too late afterwards, having an unofficial meeting. I blame Dale for all of that.
Yeah, it's all Dale's fault.
Yep, all Dale's fault. And when he listens, he's going to laugh and say some probably nice things about me, and we'll go forward from there. But wind forecast going forward. Wind was still holding hot. Pretty stiff winds overnight and into the next day. So we figured we weren't going to be operational, as in lighting fire on the ground. And I'll let you guys touch through it a little more, but we basically came into the day with the idea that reiterating how important mop-up is. That can be the one thing that can cause something to happen days after the burn if you don't have the proper mop-up in place, and securement of your unit. So we utilize the day to get people back out on most of our units throughout. Well, pretty much every single unit actually. Yeah, we retouched them all. The crews divided up. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say every unit got visited and every unit got eyes on and hands on it, right? So
yeah, super important, super cool. So Renny, touch off the start of the day.
We started the day. We did a little bit of some presentations as well, just a sort of review of some stuff. We had Brad Elder, who had been one of our trainers last year, came up with Kody, and so Brad joined us to give us a presentation on PPE. So with Brad, when he left us on the Friday after TREX last year, him and Kody drove back down south. And then when Brad got home, he got called out for a wildland fire. And unfortunately, there was an incident when he was dealing with a wildland fire, and he got burnt over. And he ended up in the hospital for about 120 days, I believe, with severe burns and grafting and everything. But, he survived. He's a strong man, and he's using that as a way to talk to people about the use of proper PPE, why you need to wear the PPE. Very emotional talk. Fortunately, I got to see Brad when I was down in Iowa at the Copper Burn Week. He came to visit us, so I was lucky to see him. Very emotional talk for people, especially for people that were part of TREX last year, right? And I know a lot of people were really choked up, but also really happy to see him. But too, his messaging was very important. The importance of PPE. the importance of not being complacent, the importance of not, ignoring your PPE. If you have it on, with you, make sure you put it on, right? And so I think that was a great way to gauge the team and have them see that, right? Because, you're on the line. I don't need to wear my gloves, or I'm just gonna wear blue jeans today and not worry about my Nomex, right? And so, I think listening to Brad's talk was really really important for everyone, and but yeah, tough for everyone as well. So, but that was really important. And then, we split. We sent the divisions out to go and check the sites. We sent Alpha back out to Dundurn because we had some logs that are still smoldering and they need to be mopped up. The Nature Conservancy staff, there's a few of them had gone out on the previous day to do some mop up and spent quite a few hours out there. So we sent the full division out there for mop up just to make sure that site was locked down and secure. It's more tucked away, surrounded by a lot of grass. So really important to get that secure. And then we split up division. Division Bravo, one half went down to Beaver Creek, and then the other half went up to Wanuskewin and the Northeast Swale to check the sites. And they found a couple little hot spots and stuff, but they got everything out and everything was locked and secured by the time they rolled in mid-afternoon.
Yeah, Renny, I thought everybody did a great job, and kind of the point of that day was just to, like Matt said, double up on that mop up, because knowing that we were going to demob everybody was going to be, basically leaving Renny and the Meewasin team kind of on their own. So we wanted to make sure we left things in good shape. We got everybody's equipment checked back in and accounted for, got the facilities cleaned up and accounted for, and then got people on the road so they could get home safely. But yeah, it was a full day's operation, and like you mentioned, we still had heat in that trail loop unit, and we still had heat in that Dundurn unit, for sure. And Dundurn is pretty remote. It's that's the one it's not right adjacent to the city, so not just your short little 10-minute stroll to go put hands on and eyes on that one, especially with the weather changing, potential strong wind events, tonight, tomorrow, and then cooling down. So very glad we spent the time we did, and then we rolled into kind of a final wrap up AAR there at the end of yesterday to really tie everything back together. And my message to all the participants was just being that student of fire. It doesn't end here. The relationships you built, the friendships, the interactions, the partnering, that's all part of it. And then keeping in mind that the skills that these participants learn throughout the week, does not just pertain to fire. It is personal skills for every aspect of their job, their career, and just being a genuine person going forward, with decision-making skills, leadership skills, communication skills, the stuff we use every single day, because fire is just a small component of all of our jobs. So building your people up, raising that bar for everybody, and truly a fantastic fire family and fire community that has been put off the table and kicked off by Renny and Dinyar. I can't tip my hat to you guys enough for what you're doing, and like Matt said too, the personal commitment, the time away from family, that's real. So I hope you can enjoy your family here the next couple days and really reflect on the great stuff that happened these past 6 days.
Yeah, thanks, Kody. And I know it's great having such a supportive family on this. And my family knows how important it is to get. My job is how passionate I am about fire, but also how passionate I am about getting other people experiencing fire and learning about fire and stuff. So yeah, I'm so glad that they're very supportive, but they also are supportive in getting other people to talk about it, right? So it's funny just talking about that family family and support kind of thing. My daughter's in grade 12 here in the local school, rural school here within high school. And one of her teachers is organizing a career fair for the end of November, and they want me to come to the career fair and talk about what I do for work, right? Because he saw some of my pictures on Instagram of the fire, and he wants me to come and talk about prescribed fire to the students, right, for career. So, that's pretty amazing, right? So.
Oh yeah, I don't know if you could pick a better person to come talk about, the career and that type of thing. I mean, the one thing I found out this week is I don't think there's like one person in the entire province of Saskatchewan that Renny doesn't know. So that's in maybe more Saskatoon region, but I mean it's impressive. It's like wherever we went, you've been around around the people long enough. You're from there. You haven't left, right? So I mean you've moved around and done some things, but people know you. People have respect for what you're doing, or when they just like, hey, what's going on? And then you're just like, oh, we're just gonna go burn. They're like, oh, yeah, typical Renny. Let's have fun, have a great day. That's about it. So I thought that was pretty neat. And I guess we did kind of miss on it. We didn't miss on it. We alluded to it earlier. We haven't really talked about it. There was a lot of talk on the internet, posting stuff of the smoke in the air in the region, in the local community, and it was nothing negative was ever posted. It was always like, oh, it's the Meewasin crew. They know what they're doing. They're safe. Blah blah blah. In a good way. And I thought the funniest thing ever was there was a downtown car fire that happened in Saskatoon while we were there, and of course, we weren't anywhere near that stuff, and the fire department obviously responded and took care of it. But so somebody posted a picture of a car on fire, and they're like, "Oh, it's just Meewasin. They're coming to help. They'll take care of it," And so obviously we did not.
I thought that was hilarious, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, we obviously did not do that, but that was just funny that no matter any smoke in the air, we're doing it right, and we're going to keep it safe and under control. So that's a great perspective to have from people trusting what you guys have going in that development of your program, in the early stages of larger fire culture, and larger operations and stuff like that. So I thought that was pretty cool. Before we dive into the very, very last part of enjoying our night and celebrating the week, I think, I was just, super grateful that you guys were able to, let me come up and be a part of this week. I'm obviously have some really good experiences, being able to get on a lot of fire, relatively early in my career. And, this big step in helping me develop, how I can train, how I can help. It's something I love to do. Fire is a huge part of my life. It doesn't matter if it's, at work, outside of work. My wife always jokes with me, well, your life revolves around fire a little too much, and she's probably not wrong. But end of the day, it's something I am passionate about, and this helped develop my training, or how I train, how I can lead and be effective, all while still, I just absolutely learned a ton from everybody at the TREX event, meeting those new faces, making those new relationships, the thoughts that are coming out of these people's mouths are just, through out of their heads, talking to me. It's just incredible what some of these people are coming up with, and why are we doing it like this? Why are we doing it like this? Well, what about if we did this? And it's not even just the fire. I mean, we had talks, last night and throughout the week, I've had talks with many individuals about just, our resource management, the thing that we all love, and just, that outside perspective from completely different ecotypes and stuff like that. I mean, I find that very, very important, those conversations and the learning opportunities that are not associated with the fire side of things. So I want to thank you, Renny, for welcoming us in. I mean, obviously Kody's been here before, and I know I couldn't replace Brad because that man can really teach, and he's a heck of a resource. But I was just, super pumped to be able to be up here for this whole week. So I want to say thanks on that.
Oh, we were so happy that you could come up here, Matt, and definitely Kody too. Both of you coming up here, and I hope you enjoyed Saskatchewan and working with us. And we learned so much from both of you, right? And being able there to share your experience and knowledge with us was just phenomenal. And really helped build our confidence, and. And and just knowing that there's a bigger fire community out there, like we've always known there's other people doing fire, right? But we've never been able to really connect with those people. And then now we know, I think everyone knows that, we are part of this bigger community, right? And just because there's an international border between us doesn't mean that's going to stop us, right? So
yeah, and like Kody always says, we're one big fire family. Everybody that participated the week got their first fire on the ground. They're a part of it now. I mean, they're forever a part of it, no matter what happens. So, Codes.
Yeah. I mean, and the reality of it is, Renny, if something starts in the United States and crosses the border, it doesn't see that border. The prairie continues. So, I think our fire culture and our fire family should do the same. We shouldn't draw lines on a map. We should just all be one. Which is what we need. And I hope I portrayed to all the participants that if they ever need anything, ever have questions, to just reach out. If I don't know the answer, I will find somebody who can get you the answer. Because I've met a lot of people just like you have, Renny, over time that a lot of really truly great resources for all aspects of stewardship, all aspects of fire, and that's what it's all about, is just leading up, training that next generation to be better than what we are. So I'm very humbled. I'm just so humbled to come up and be a part of getting that Canadian effect off the ground.
Yeah, no, we definitely appreciate their Kody, and and it's not just not just the international border that we're pushing here, right? Bringing you guys up and helping us, but it's the provincial borders too. We had people from Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta coming to this TREX event, right? And Manitoba has a little bit more history of using fire, especially around the Winnipeg area. Alberta, totally scared of fire, right? They had some starts and stops of fire in the 80s and the 90s, but we had a lot of attendees from Alberta as well, right? So, and a couple of the attendees there, they want to start seeing fire on that landscape in Alberta, right? And they're leaders in the grassland conservation and rangeland management in Alberta, right? So they're going to help us build that culture in Alberta as well, right? So, using our TREX as a way to build that bigger network across the three prairie provinces, it's super exciting, right? So, and then connecting us into what you guys are doing down there, it's great.
Awesome. And then I think me and Kody are in complete agreement. We want to, obviously, he already said it, but we can't say it enough. Like, commend you and Danyar for high quality operations all week, planning everything, and then you did a fantastic job of taking on that incident commander role and stepping back and keeping your hands out of the dirt just as much as you wanted to be in there. That is a super hard role, and I thought it went really well and super smooth for you. So I was proud of you after you voiced that you were super nervous about it. So that was great on our end. But
well, thanks. Appreciate that, Matt.
Absolutely. And then before we wrap this completely up, we did have to have dinner at Renny's home away from home. No? Not home away from home? No.
Home away from home. My wife calls it my happy place.
Your happy place. So we got to experience the Blue Rhino in all its glory. It was a great little place, little bar there not in Saskatoon, in Sutherland, yep. And of course, not a sponsor yet. I'm just going to keep saying that whenever I bring up anything. But no, had some great food, had a couple drinks that were, I got to try some of the local Canadian beer that was delicious. And then, we had some great hospitality from the staff there, and very entertaining. Everybody got to catch up. That the people that were able to stick around, we had a really good turnout of people from the event that came over. We only expecting 5 or 6 people, right? And then, what did we have? 15, 20 people show up.
Right.
Yeah,
I think we had 22 people at the max. So yeah.
That's awesome. And, we got to have some really good conversations before people left town. We got to say some goodbyes, bittersweet moments there, having people walk out the door. And of course, Kody, continues to learn the hard way whenever he brings me anywhere. I'm usually the last person out the door, regardless of what's going on. And so, he was trying to not fall asleep, and I was just trying to push him to stay awake. And here we are doing the podcast on the road. It got a little late on us last night, but no, that was super fun. Great way to celebrate, all the successes, and nobody was there to do anything crazy, but blow off a little steam and take a breather after a good high quality week of fun training adventure in my mind. So yeah. Well,
and it was good. We had lots of great laughs and everything. So yeah, I think that was good. Just give everyone that little bit of a break, and the entertainment from some of the staff there too was pretty good. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. We have to give a shout out to Cindy.
Oh
we
yeah,
have to give a shout out to Cindy.
Big shout out to Cindy for doing a heck of a job keeping everybody waited on and heavily entertained. So that was awesome. And so I guess we've taken some serious time here away from your family tonight, so we appreciate it there. And I guess you have any last things to add, Renny?
Well, actually, doing this podcast, when you mentioned on Sunday, hey, I want to try this podcast thing out. I'm not one of those podcast kind of guys, right? But I think this was actually really, it was a lot of fun on Sunday, talking about beforehand and everything, and then having this discussion right now. Like, this is a level of after action review, walking step by step by step, and it's going to keep the memory of this TREX, right? So I think you've started a new trend for TREXs there, Matt, because this is this is a great okay, after 3.5 hours of after action review, but it's a good way to log what we did, right? And share that experience with people too, right? On how do these things work, right? And how what to expect and what not to expect, right? So, no, I think this is a real fun way of doing it. So,
yeah, I'm excited to get have to listen to it all back and do a little minor editing because, sorry for the listeners, but it's going to be a pretty raw cut. But yeah, I think I'm going to try to break it up maybe into, couple day segments so people maybe only have to take a 30, 45 minute blip at a time. I'm one of those people that like to listen to really long podcasts, like a drive and stuff, but most people don't do as much driving as maybe, us three people do in our daily lives. So break it down for them and, have a lot of opportunity to listen and maybe, hopefully some of the we'll try to get it out, of course, to all our listeners or all the participants of the TREX if they want to tune in and say, man, these guys are weird. But hey, they already knew that. But yeah, so perfect. Kody. Oh, go ahead, Renny.
And I just wanted to say, thanks to you guys for all the hard work and time. And like you guys were there early every morning. You last one's out every night as well, with me kind of thing. And we had a lot of great laughs and a lot of good discussion. And, you guys are part of the family, right? Our family, right? So really appreciate that. And yeah, it was, great coming down to Iowa back in April to burn with you guys. I will be down in Iowa again if you let me. And it was great. And all the crew that we had here during TREX, just the level of quality of work by everyone. I just want to thank them as well. Everyone did such a great job. And, we pulled off in that week of TREX probably 10 years worth of prescribed fire in Saskatoon. What we would have done 5 years ago, that number of acres we burned 5 years ago, what we burnt in the last 4 days was, equivalent to 10 years worth of work, right? So just phenomenal, just amazing. So
well, super glad to be a part of it. Super happy, Codes.
Yeah, and just to cap that off, I don't even know if we said it, but we knocked off 15 total burn units, right at 200 acres completed. of good ecological burning, and then, you know, all of the organizational landmarks that were hit, all of the personal landmarks that were hit, from first burn, first burn boss leads, first line leads for some people, first time driving UTVs for some people,
Torch time.
And then, you know, the organizational stuff of biggest burn for a day, biggest burn, you know, probably for a season. You know, most acres burned on each organization for a season. And then, you know, just setting those landmarks for, and that ground level foundation for those organizations going forward. And then, you know, getting that organizational buy-in, you know, having, you know, Meewasin's executive director, CEO come in on morning one and kind of give the talk, and having the elder come in and give the blessing. You know, just the cultural closeness that is there around the Saskatoon area is just something special.
Yeah.
So, you know, keep those early burns near and dear to your heart, and then, we'll see where another 5 years down the road goes, and where things are at.
And we'll be seeing you in Iowa. It's an absolute must. You come down.
Well, I'll be down there, and and make sure that present for Jeff Sago there, give him, make sure he enjoys that. So.
Oh yeah, we'll give Sago his Beaver energy drink. It's gonna be scary for the world for a couple minutes. So, all right. Well, thank you, Renny. I really appreciate it, man. And here, I'm gonna hit the record off button.
I definitely want to thank Matt Shanklin for recording this podcast back in October 2023, and having that insight on to try and capture the feel of how TREX went, and definitely having Matt and then Kody Wohlers come up for that training and to help lead us through prescribed fire. And what's interesting, we're just about to launch into our 4th Canadian Prairies TREX here in Saskatoon in October 2025. And so even seeing how much we've grown since 2023 has been amazing. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and definitely thank you, Matt and Kody, for your great wisdom and support on our TREX events here in Canada.
Yes, thank you so much, and maybe you guys will hear more episodes like this later on as our next TREX happens. Ooh. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to Prairie Fire Lines on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, or visit our website at grasslandfire.ca to stay updated on all things prescribed fire in the prairies. Huge thank you goes out to the Weston's Prairie Grassland Initiative for making this project possible, and to all of you for listening. Until next time, stay curious about the power of prescribed fire. This is Prairie Fire Lines, where we keep the conversation burning. And I'm your host, Kat Zenz, signing off.